Libby. Good morning, or good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the House Appropriations Committee, Transportation and Environment Subcommittee budget hearing for Maryland Transportation Authority, Maryland Department of Transportation State Highway, Department of Information Technology, and Department of Natural Resources. We will be taking the agencies in that order, and we will begin with our budget analyst, Mr. Quist. You may begin.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Beginning on page 1 of the report, the operating budget for the Maryland Transportation Authority increases by $42.6 million or 7.3% to $629.9 million. On page 2 for the PAYGO capital budget, this declines by $201.5 million or 15.7% to $1.1 billion. As a reminder, MDTA's budget is non-budgeted and revenues come from the Transportation Authority Fund, which is separate from the state's Transportation Trust Fund. Turning to page 6 of the analysis, Exhibit 2 provides an overview of agency spending in fiscal 2027. About 63% of the spending comprises the capital program. The debt service costs are about 10%, and about 27% is for the operating program. Due to the significant increase in capital expenditures related to the Francis Scott Key Bridge construction program, the capital program grows by about $560 million from the fiscal 25 actual expenditures to fiscal 27 budgeted expenditures. On page 7, Exhibit 3 shows the proposed budget changes for the operating budget. The largest change is under debt service requirements. These grow by about $21.1 million. Personnel expenses grow by about $7.8 million. And then there are some other increases for other operating expenses, including contractual services and purchases for agency operations. On page 9, Exhibit 4 provides a breakdown of fiscal 27 revenue sources. Toll revenues are the agency's primary ongoing revenue source collected from facilities that it owns and operates. Fiscal 27, however, these only account for about 46% of overall revenues due to capital fund revenues, including about $566 million in projected reimbursements from the federal government for the Francis Scott Key Bridge construction, and about $253 million in bond proceeds, which are projected. On page 10, Exhibit 5 shows a breakdown of toll revenue numbers. Fiscal 25 revenues for tolls decreased by about $19.6 million to a total of $828.9 million. However, despite this decrease, fiscal 25 was the 5th consecutive year in which toll revenues exceeded the $800 million mark following significant declines due to the pandemic in fiscal 2020 and 2021. However, as shown on Exhibit 5, MDTA projects that toll revenues will continue to decline in fiscal 26 and 27. On page 11, Exhibit 6 provides a breakdown of actual toll revenues by MDTA facility in fiscal 25. You can see from this pie chart that the largest share came from the Fort McHenry Tunnel, about 30%, followed by I-95 and the Baltimore Harbor Tunnel. Combined, these three facilities make up about 2/3 of MDTA toll revenues. On page 12 is a summary of personnel data for the agency. The fiscal 27 budget is unchanged at about 1,641 positions. There were some decreases in fiscal 26, including the abolishment of 12 positions as part of the statewide voluntary separation program and the transfer of 44 IT-related positions to the MDOT Secretary's office as part of the MDOT's agency-wide consolidation of personnel for that purpose. Turning now to discussion of the capital program, on page 13, Exhibit 7 shows a breakdown of 6-year program capital spending, which totals about $8.4 billion. Changes from year to year over the 6-year period are primarily driven by cash flow needs for the Key Bridge reconstruction. This project accounts for over 50% of the total capital program over that time period. And you can see capital spending peaks in fiscal 29 and 2030 as that project is projected to near its conclusion and then decline in fiscal 2031 accordingly. On page 14, Exhibit 8 shows a breakdown of fiscal 27 planned capital spending by facility. You can see on this pie chart, the Key Bridge is about 63% of capital spending, followed by I-95 at 20%, and the Chesapeake Bay Bridge at about 11%. These three facilities make up over 90% of capital spending. A breakdown of the individual projects making up the fiscal 27 capital allowance is shown on pages 15 and page 16. On page 17, Exhibit 10 provides a analysis of capital cash flow changes from the fiscal 26 budget as introduced to the fiscal 26 working appropriation. There was an increase of about $227 million, and from the 26 working appropriation to the 27 allowance, there's a $201.5 million decrease. Again, these changes are largely related to the cash flow needs of the Key Bridge reconstruction project. On page 18, Exhibit 11 provides a list of 4 new projects that were added to the current CTP. Total, these projects are about $311.5 million, the largest being the Chesapeake Bay Bridge Protection Project, which is discussed further in the issues section of the analysis. Turning to the first issue, beginning on page 19, is a detailed discussion on MDTA's financial outlook. Exhibit 12 shows the 4 main financial standards that MDTA must adhere to. These include a rate covenant and debt service coverage ratio, which pertain to the level of net revenues compared to debt service costs, an unencumbered cash limit, and a debt outstanding limit. On page 20, Exhibit 13 is a summary of MDTA's financial forecast, which lists the projected values for these financial standards over the 6-year period. For the debt service coverage ratio, the fiscal 27 value is projected to be 2.2. The debt service coverage ratio is projected to decline below the 2.0 requirement in fiscal 28 to 1.9 and continues to decline each year the remainder of the forecast to 1.2 in fiscal 2031. The rate covenant compliance ratio is projected to be 1.7 in fiscal 27 and is projected to decline below the 1.0 required ratio to 0.9 in fiscal 2031. The unencumbered cash policy is $595.7 million in 25, declines to the $400 million level in fiscal 27 and remains at that level throughout the remainder of the forecast. And the debt outstanding limit, fiscal 27 debt outstanding is projected to be about $2.7 billion. And increases above the current $4.0 billion level in fiscal 29 to $4.2 billion and reaches just under $4.7 billion in fiscal 2030. Due to this projected increase in debt outstanding above the current limit. There has been departmental legislation introduced this session which would raise the debt outstanding limit to $5.0 billion. On page 22, Exhibit 14 provides a summary of the projected debt issuances and debt outstanding. Based on the changes in these financial standards and the financial stress that they project in the out years, MDTA continues to project the need for a system-wide toll increase by fiscal 2028. The analysis asks MDTA to comment on the timing of that potential toll increase as well as how it would be implemented. The second issue that's discussed in the analysis, beginning on the bottom of page 23, is a discussion of the Francis Scott Key Bridge reconstruction. That reconstruction project continued to advance through design and preliminary construction over the past year. Committee narrative in last year's Joint Chairman's Report requested that MDTA provide quarterly status updates on that project. In the most recent report, MDTA indicated that about $238 million in state funds had been spent as of November 2025. A breakdown of those expenditures is shown in Exhibit 15 on page 26. MDTA indicated that as of November 2025, about $53.3 million in federal funds reimbursements had occurred as of that time. These were $53.3 million out of the preliminary $60 million in federal fund quick release funds that were allocated to the project in March of 2024 for initial disaster removal and response. MDTA projects that over the next 6 months, the remainder of that $60 million, as well as $217 million in additional federal reimbursements are projected to occur. However, the timing of those federal reimbursements are up to the federal government. Again, as a reminder, the federal reimbursement, the Key Bridge is federal funding occurs under a reimbursable basis, so initially state funds would have to be used for the initial cash flows while federal reimbursements are filed for and occur. Then on beginning on the bottom of page 26 is a discussion of the Chesapeake Bay Bridge. In March of last year, the National Transportation Safety Board, as part of its investigation into the causes of the collapse of the Key Bridge, issued recommendations to certain bridges across the country, including the Chesapeake Bay Bridge, which were constructed prior to the adoption of current standards for the design of bridges to minimize their vulnerability to collapse in the case of a vessel collision. Language in last year's budget bill restricted funds in the MDOT Secretary's office pending the receipt of a report from MDOT and MDTA on the assessment of vulnerability levels of the Key Bridge, as well as the development of a comprehensive risk reduction plan. The report submitted by MDTA indicates that a vulnerability assessment of the Chesapeake Bay Bridge was conducted, which indicated a higher than currently acceptable risk of vulnerability. As a result, MDTA has initiated the Bay Bridge Protection Project to design and construct enhanced pier protection systems and has initiated the beginning stages of that project. As I mentioned earlier, that project has been added to the current capital program, and there is about $42 million in capital funding programmed in fiscal 27. This project implementation is occurring coinciding to the Chesapeake Bay Crossing Study Tier 2 NEPA study, which has been ongoing for the last few years to eventually design a new Chesapeake Bay Bridge. This study met milestones over the past year, including in December 2025, approving a recommended preferred alternative for the the construction of the new bridge, as well as the issuance of a draft environmental impact study in January of 2026. It is anticipated that this study will fully conclude in November 26 with the issuance of a final environmental impact study and record of decision by the Federal Highway Administration, which would allow for the design phase of the project to then begin. The final issue that's covered in the analysis is on the collection of outstanding toll debt. This was also an issue that committee narrative in last year's joint chairman's report requested MDTA to submit a report to the budget committees on. In the report that was submitted, the data on page 29, Exhibit 16 was provided, which showed that in total there was about $1.6 billion in outstanding toll revenue and civil penalty revenues as of the end of fiscal 2025, dating back to 2014. In Exhibit 16, this shows a breakdown that $907.4 million of that was attributable to Maryland vehicles, and $730.5 million of that was attributed to out-of-state vehicles. Of the out-of-state vehicles, the largest share, about $202 million, was attributable to the state of Virginia, followed by Pennsylvania and New Jersey, which comprise the top three. In its report, MDTA discussed several strategies which it was looking into for increasing the collection of this debt. This included the expansion of E-ZPass utilization and interoperability with other non-E-ZPass toll collection systems nationwide, pursuing reciprocity agreements with other states, pursuing collection agency services, as well as the ongoing flagging of in-state motorists for the MVA to potentially suspend or non-renewal for outstanding debt owed. To conclude, on page 31, the DLS operating recommended action, there's one piece of committee narrative. DLS is recommending ongoing reporting on the Francis Scott Key Bridge reconstruction program. For the capital program, DLS is recommending concurrence with the allowance as introduced. That concludes the DLS presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Quist, for your very thorough analysis as always, and welcome, Madam Secretary and Director Gardner. Gartner, would you like to begin?
Yes, for the record, I'm Katie Thompson, Acting Secretary of Transportation. I'm joined today by Bruce Gartner, Executive Director of the Maryland Transportation Authority, and we appreciate the opportunity to be here to testify today. Thank you again to Sam Quist for his review of the department's budget. In my role as Acting Secretary of Transportation, over the past 2 months, I've been able to learn a lot about MDTA and tolling in Maryland. And one thing that is evident to me is that Mr. Gardner and his team have accomplished a great deal under very trying circumstances, particularly over the past 2 years. Before turning it over to Bruce to address the DLS analysis, I'd like to highlight several important accomplishments that occurred over the last year. Due to the unwavering hard work and dedication of the MDOT team and MDTA has continued to make great progress with the Key Bridge rebuild. It recently achieved 70% design in just 14 months compared to other projects that typically average 7 years, while also progressing critical path construction. Typical transportation projects of this magnitude often take years of planning before even commencing design and construction, and we plan to continue apace. Safety, of course, is paramount, and we will not sacrifice that. MDTA has also made substantial financial and operational commitments to support the Francis Scott Key Bridge reconstruction, including advancing upfront construction costs, hundreds of millions of dollars in insurance proceeds, and pursuit of litigation against the Dolly's owners and management to hold them responsible for their gross negligence. Maryland is also working in lockstep with the Federal Highway Administration on all aspects of this project, including permitting, design specifications, and a comprehensive financial and risk mitigation plan. Together, we will continue working closely with our federal partners to deliver a safe, modern bridge as quickly and as cost-effectively as possible. I'm happy to report that MDTA received a $7.5 million in federal grant funds from the Infrastructure for Rebuilding America grant program. This grant will go for the Curtis Creek Drawbridge Rehabilitation and Resiliency Project. The drawbridge is a critical link with the Key Bridge to provide a much-needed third crossing across the Patapsco River. Lastly, I'm pleased to report that the MDTA's middle AA credit ratings were recently affirmed by Moody's, Fitch, and S&P, although the rating agencies continue to monitor the timing of federal reimbursements for the Key Bridge. Let me say in closing that the MDTA is dedicated to delivering safe, efficient, sustainable, and equitable transportation solutions for all of its customers, and to improving the customer service experience. Now I'll turn it over to Bruce Gartner to provide some additional information on MDTA's efforts over the past year and address the DLS analysis.
Thank you. And Mr. Gartner.
Thank you, and thank you, Acting Secretary. For the record, Bruce Gartner, Executive Director of the Maryland Transportation Authority. Thank you for the opportunity to be here today. As the Secretary stated, 2025 did represent a significant year in terms of our focusing on our core operations, enhancing our infrastructure, improving our agency's financial health, and enhancing customer experience. Sam mentioned the Bay Bridge Pier Protection Project. I wanted to highlight that as something our team jumped right on in the spring of 2024 to initiate the study into a protection project for the Bay Bridge and work on the AASHTO analysis that was required to do that. We issued an RFP last month for the installation of physical protection measures and have been working on those operational enhancements as well. Multiple protective structures would be installed under the project. The total cost for that construction would be about $175 million, and it would be anticipated to start in the spring of 2027 following the selection of a design builder. Considering this is a budget hearing, I also wanted to discuss the general physical condition and fiscal condition of the MDTA's infrastructure and our agency. On page 13, Sam mentioned that the vast majority of our 6-year capital program is focused on system preservation, and the MDTA's robust annual inspection program helps identify and address our system preservation, state of good repair needs. So we are focused on that and funding and doing that, and that while we do that, we still have to think about our financial resiliency. We are a very resilient agency. We have a system-wide tolls that we've withstood the impacts of COVID-19 referenced in the remarks and also the collapse of the Key Bridge. But it is important to remember that it has been over a decade since we experienced a toll increase. After that downward toll adjustment in 2015, the compounded annual growth rate of inflation of about 2.8% annually has resulted in a cumulative increase of about 36%. So while we've been able to sustain ourselves through conservative budgetary practices, innovative financing, those methods are no longer sufficient in the future. And as to the timing of the toll increase, we are looking at a fiscal 2028 toll increase that has been projected for the past couple of years since the collapse of the Key Bridge. We must do this to make every effort to preserve the MDTA's bond credit ratings as the agency prepares into another cycle of issuing debt with issuances over $3 billion projected through 2031. I'd like to thank the committee for passing the bond cap legislation out of the House. It's much appreciated as we continue to work on that with the crossovers. But the system-wide toll increase that we are planning on and would pursue would help solidify our finances moving forward. Before we do that, we have to remain committed to collecting our existing toll streams, with the pre-existing debt owed by both in-state and out-of-state customers. A couple of examples were mentioned in Sam's analysis. I want to highlight the reciprocity agreements that we're working closely with Pennsylvania. It's important to note that Pennsylvania and some of the New York agencies have recently figured out some of the legal determinations that they need to do that reciprocity agreement between their agencies. We've been following that closely to ensure that we can join in into that at the appropriate time. We anticipate that in calendar 2027 is when we would be able to be up and running with a reciprocity agreement with Pennsylvania. The collection through out-of-state debt collection through agencies is also moving forward. We've developed draft RFP, and we have the intention of issuing that later this year for award within calendar year 2026. So those are all important initiatives to make sure that we collect on that debt that is owed to us. That's very important that, and this committee has highlighted in the past. So we continue on those efforts, as well as just looking at everything else we can do as an agency. We've worked through teams of multidisciplinary staff to identify things that have ranged from just putting a QR code on a mailing so it's easier for a video toll customer to go right to their account information to pay that more easily, to sending second notice warning payments so that they, if they're ignored once, they cannot be ignored a second time, to redesigning envelopes so that they pop out to people on a collection. So a number of additional initiatives, but that has been a significant effort of the agency over the past year. In 2025, we've continued to make customers also part of our focus. Last year, there was legislation to require an installment payment plan. We have implemented that. It has been a challenge. We've sent out many notices engaging with customers to let them know that we have those payment plans available before they go to CCU. Getting folks to respond in this day of spam messages and everybody saying that you're overdue and delinquent, it continues to be a challenge, but we are focused on that. We also have added just technology for pop-up messages and push notifications to if people apply to for our application, they can get that determination that they've gone through our toll facilities. So on to the DLS analysis and our requested comment. I would like to thank Sam for his thorough work on our budget and our analysis this year and working with us throughout the year. On page 23, DLS did ask us to comment about the timing of the toll increase. So that is something that we would have to start in early calendar year 2027, and we would follow the process that we go through that's established in state statute. That's in Transportation Article 4-312. It's a public process that begins with a proposal from staff to the MDTA board for their consideration, followed by 2 public comment periods and public hearings at each of the toll facilities throughout our system. Afterwards, the board would take that final action to approve a toll recommendation, and that entire process could last roughly 10 months. Included in our response, we have a flow chart that describes each step of that process, and we are taking actions this year to basically start that evaluation process of different tolling options that would be available to us, looking at our capital program and our cash flow needs to make sure that we have the right recommendation in place for 2028 and beyond, and to make sure that we can continue to improve our system. That concludes my remarks, Madam Chair. Available for questions.
Thank you very much. While you just mentioned the potential toll increases, let me just follow up on that before I turn it over to the other members. So we have this nice chart that you made for us about the process, and it begins with you developing a proposal for consideration by the board, and it ends with a board vote. In between, there are 9 public hearings, comment periods, et cetera, et cetera. When do you plan to start that? When do you plan to make a proposal for the board?
It would probably be around January of 2027, in that early 2027 time period.
Okay. And you expect the board to vote on the recommended action by?
In that summer, so we would hope to have it in place by that September of 2027 time period.
Okay, so we're talking about next year?
Yes.
Okay. While I'm at it, let me just ask another question about my favorite topic, the outstanding toll debt. We kind of get the same answer every year, even before your time, that we're working on reciprocity agreements, we're working with Pennsylvania. Understood. Has anything really changed in the progress on this since, since last year? Has anything really changed in 12 months? Because we're still looking at $202 million that residents of Virginia owe us, $202 million. And then that doesn't even count the other states. So Are we really making any progress on this?
Yes, we are, and it has taken a long time. It's much longer than any of us want. The significant action of the New York agreement with Pennsylvania, getting that close on things is definitely progress, and we just saw that within the past month. So, we have to also work with our own Maryland Motor Vehicle Administration on some details about how they would set up the IT systems to more of a seamless process for our customers. The last thing we want to do is put up another system in place that causes anybody confusion in how it's implemented. So we really want to make sure we're doing it right the first time. And the out-of-state collection agency, that we've learned a lot of things, and things have progressed in that industry over the past year. I did look back to my testimony last year, and it frustrates me that we haven't been able to go faster, but we actually are very conscious of doing that right as well and making sure we have an effective system in place.
Okay, so we're going to put that JCR request in the budget again so that you can document all of the progress you're going to make in the next 12 months and let us know how we're doing on collecting any of the debt these several states residents owe us, which total $730 million. You're going to expect that in the budget.
Understood.
Thank you.
Not surprised.
Delegate Spiegel.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good to see you both, and thanks for your good work, especially, Mr. Director, your strong management of the efforts to rebuild the Key Bridge. Some of the questions that I was going to ask about toll increases and out-of-state toll collections have already been anticipated by you and by the chair, so I'm just going to ask you my last remaining question, which was about an update on MDTA's efforts to roll out the implementation of automated enforcement systems on some of your facilities. I think we talked about this at last year's budget hearing, that you are in the process of, after receiving legislative authorization, working with SHA to have speed cameras put up, for example, on the ICC and some other facilities. Just wanted to ask where we are in that process.
Thank you. So fortunately, Will's here with me from State Highway because they are leading that procurement. But we do keep touch, and we're waiting for that the procurement to get out on the street from SHA. They've had some challenges with the court system, things that they're cleaning up, and Will might save you from having to do your rest of yours. But we were really thankful that it is a statewide system because to do these things individually is a challenge. So turn it over to the administrator from State Highway Administration.
Yeah. Thank you, Bruce. Good afternoon. For the record, I'm Will Pine, State Highway Administrator. Within that legislation, State Highway was designated as the responsible for completing the procurement. That's because at the same time that the ICC was being prepared, 695 and I-83 were also passed out of session last session. So we're currently actively in the procurement for the automated speed enforcement program for the work zone cameras that passed out of the Road Worker Protection Act in 2024. We've hired a consultant to develop the RFP for the fixed cameras that we're planning to put out later this year so that it can be in place later next year. So it is actively moving, but our priority is first implementing work zone, followed by the fixed camera system.
Got it. Thank you. When you say later this year and early next year, you're talking about fiscal year or calendar year?
Calendar year.
Got it. Thank you.
Do we have any other questions? Yes, Delegate Harrison, thank you.
Delegate Chair Wilson, Watson, asked for an update on this central collections unit, on the debt collection for tolls. And I think that, and Chair Watson, please correct me, you were asking for the JCR, which basically will come next year.
That's right. I mean, I'm just telling them to expect that in the budget. Right. Yeah. I think I know where you're going. Go ahead.
I would like to see incremental reports, because if we've been asking about this over and over again, waiting until next year to get an answer, to me is just not really acceptable. I would like to see incremental reports so that we can see the progress on that.
We can make that
Okay.
We can make that change.
And the one question that I had with the debt, is it, who is the one that's collecting the debt? Is it MDTA, or does it go through our central collections unit? Where is that?
So there's three different ways that the toll debt is collected. So initially, when we provide the notices, and we can provide a flow chart of this process too. I think we did last year in the committee hearings. But we will collect it up till a point where we're not getting responses from the customer. So they have an opportunity to go through contest something in court, and then when we don't get a collection after that, we will at a certain point put a flag for a non-renewal on the vehicle, and then there's a suspension action that can be taken at a certain dollar amount. And then at some point, they will be referred to Central Collection Unit at DBM. So at that point, it's kind of out of our hands. It's with DBM. They have the opportunity at that point, since they are managing that debt, to add their fee, which is a 70% fee on top of our tolls and our civil penalties to that debt. So that's for the in-state customers. So it's a combination of MDTA and then Central Collections. For out-of-state debt, that's why we need that collection agency RFP, so we can go out. So that would be a third party collecting that debt for us. And then once we get to the reciprocity agreements, we're in partnership with those other agencies out of state to help enforce through those reciprocal agreements.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Delegate Metzger.
I need to go back to the toll increases. And I have got to say that I think if we rolled out toll increases before the Key Bridge is built, that's disgusting. I have to say that my constituents are driving 2 and 3 hours, and if you raise the tolls before the bridge is even built, I can just imagine the anger. And I think I've said it before, but I think we need to figure out a way for the constituents in particularly in eastern Baltimore County, that live in Edgemere and that sort of thing, to reduce or even give them free for some time the increases. But I think increasing the tolls is a bad idea, particularly now. It's not a great marketing program.
Yes, sir. Mr. Gardner.
Yes, so there are a number of things that we can do in any scenario of toll adjustments. As has been done before, there's been different discount programs offered. Back in 2009, the commuter discount program that we did have went from a 30-day to a 45-day, so that was actually kind of less preferential to those commuters. So there are different types of scenarios that we can do to provide discounts to those frequent commuters in those regions. We've actually been doing more outreach to our commuters recently, because we want to make sure that anyone that's out there that isn't benefiting as much as they could knows that and knows how to participate in that program. So there's things that we can do in advance of a toll increase to educate the customers, particularly in those regions that you're talking about existing programs. So we are committed to doing that. You could add that to the JCR report if you wanted updates on that type of effort that we have, but we can wrap in also considerations to incentivize the use of the Easy Pass by out-of-state travelers, commercial trucks, et cetera. That would be a financial benefit to the agency as a whole, allow us to keep our financial standards and try to minimize the impact on the customers you're talking about. Free passage through our facilities is not something that our trust agreement does allow, but we can work in other ways to benefit them.
Well, I remember the John F. Kennedy Bridge. The people that lived up there, I think they got a month for very reduced cost. So I think we could do the same thing, but you got to understand, my people are driving and spending 2 and 3 hours and buying 2 and 3 tanks of gas to go normal. So I'm fighting.
And this morning was even worse because we had an incident on 95 southbound. Yeah.
And I won't stop.
Okay. Understood.
Delegate Metzger, very, very relevant point about the additional burden, especially on residents that live in your district. And I know that MDTA and the board will have to consider that. So that was a good flag. Thank you. Any other questions for MDTA? All right, we are going to move on to, thank you so much, Director Gardner, and Madam Secretary, you will stay put, and we're going to have Will Pines from State Highway Administration come up, and our analyst, oh, wait, we have one person to testify, apologize. That is Brian Ziegler, are you here?
I'm sorry, Madam Chair, Brian Ziegler was unavailable to testify today.
Okay, so that is it. Then we may proceed with Kelly Norton, who is our DLS analyst. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. We're going to begin with page 1. We have the operating budget summary. The budget for fiscal 2027 increases to $432 million, a 9.3% increase compared to fiscal 2026. The pay-go capital budget summary is on page 2. The fiscal 2027 allowance increases to $1.1 billion, or 1.9% from fiscal 2026. Exhibit 1 on page 5 shows the traffic fatality and fatality rates from calendar 2015 through 2024. Annual traffic fatalities and fatalities per 100 million miles traveled decreased in calendar 2024. The fatality rate dropped to 1.01, but still remains higher than the pre-pandemic average of 0.89 and the agency's goal of 0.81. Exhibit 2 on page 6 shows the annual person hours of delay and travel time reliability on Maryland roads. Typically, the annual attainment report on transportation system performance has included projected data for the most recent calendar year. However, the 2026 report revised the data for calendar 2023 and 2024, but did not provide data for 2025. The agency should provide an estimate of the calendar 2025 metrics. Exhibit 3 on page 7 shows the percentage of bridges in the state highway network having one or more components such as deck, superstructure, substructure, or culvert rated in poor or worse condition for calendar 2016 through 2025. In calendar 2025, 0.8% of Maryland's bridges were rated as poor or worse. SHA has a goal to keep at least 85% of its highway network in an overall preferred maintenance condition. Exhibit 4 on page 8 shows that SHA met that goal 7 times since calendar 2016, including in calendar 2025. SHA had 3 grant awards totaling $36.2 million rescinded as part of the passing of House Resolution 1, or the One Big Beautiful Bill Act. Those rescissions included a $31.9 million from the Low Carbon Transportation Materials Grant Program, $3.3 million from the Neighborhood Access and Equity Grant Program, an additional $950,000 from the same program on behalf of the town of Berlin. SHA should discuss the status of the projects for which the grant funding has been rescinded and include whether the projects will be completed with other funds. The fiscal 2027 budget includes a proposed deficiency appropriation of $2.6 million in special funds for increased electricity costs for roadway lighting and $10 million for the work zone safety program due to a change in accounting for program expenses. SHA should discuss the new accounting practices that prompted the need for this proposed deficiency. Exhibit 5 on page 10 shows the overview of agency spending in fiscal 2027. State system maintenance comprised 93% of the operating budget. The remaining 7% is for the Highway Safety Operating Program. Exhibit 6 on page 11 has a proposed budget and provides a breakdown of the areas of growth between fiscal 2026 and 2027. Fiscal 2027 increases $36.9 million over the 2026 working appropriation. Contractual services accounts for 50% of this growth, with increased spending in areas such as road maintenance and equipment rental, supplies and materials for snow removal, building and road repair, and engineering services. Personnel expenses account for a $9.6 million increase from fiscal 2026 to 2027. As of February 18th of 2026, SHA had expended $21.8 million over its $64.2 million fiscal 2026 snow removal budget, for a total of $86 million. SHA should address how they will address the higher than expected snow removal expenditures in fiscal 2026. Personnel data can be found on page 12. Regular positions decreased by 51 from the fiscal 2026 working appropriation. 59 positions were transferred to the Secretary's office as part of MDOT's efforts to consolidate IT operations. The fiscal 2027 allowance includes 8 new positions to support federal aid processing. For the second consecutive year, localities received 20% of the gasoline and motor vehicle revenue account. That percentage will return to 15.6% in fiscal 2028. 8. Exhibit 7 on page 14 shows the highway user revenues grants from fiscal 2025 through 2027. There is a slight increase in fiscal 2027 of $0.2 million for a total of $437.6 million. Exhibit 8 shows the HUR grants by jurisdiction for fiscal 2027. Looking to the Consolidated Transportation Program, Exhibit 9 on page 16 shows the 6-year program capital spending by investment category from fiscal 2026 to 2031. The 6-year total is roughly $7.8 billion, with 44% going towards system preservation. On the next page, Exhibit 10 provides an overview of agency spending by program for fiscal 2027. The minor program comprises 80% of the fiscal 2027 allowance, with the remaining to be expended on major projects and development and evaluation program. Language in the fiscal 2027 budget makes $10 million of the special fund appropriation in the state system construction equipment program contingent on the enactment of legislation expanding the allowable uses of the Strategic Energy Investment Fund. The relevant expansion is contained in 2 pieces of language with slightly different authorizations or purposes. Those 2 pieces of language are Senate Bill 386 and the BRFA of 2026. DLS recommends adding more specific language to the contingency language to more closely align with the provision expanding the allowable uses of the CEF for these purposes. On page 18, Exhibit 11 shows the minor program funding by investment category for fiscal 2027. System preservation makes up 54% of spending, followed by safety and security with 19%. Exhibit 12 on page 19 shows the minor program funding by project type. Safety, congestion relief, highway, and bridge projects receive $724.5 million in fiscal 2027. Exhibit 13 on page 20 has the capital cash flow changes from fiscal 2026 through 2027. The fiscal 2026 appropriation increases $49.8 million over the fiscal 2026 as introduced, and the fiscal 2027 allowance increases $44.9 million over the fiscal 2026 working appropriation. Exhibit 14 on pages 21 through 30 shows select major projects that are receiving at least $1 million in fiscal 2027 or over $5 million in the 6-year program. Exhibit 15 on page 31 shows the percentage of first-year funding and ongoing funding in fiscal 2027. The pie chart mistakenly includes the fiscal 2026 first-year funding. Ongoing funding is $1.1 billion, or 99% of the allowance, and first-year funding accounts for $14 million, or 1%. On page 32, Exhibit 16 shows the breakdown of the first-year funding for fiscal 2026 and 2027. There is $3.5 million in first-year funding for fiscal 2026 and $14.5 million for fiscal 2027. Exhibit 17 on page 33 shows the major changes from the last CTP. 13 projects were added for a total cost of $426.7 million. Moving on to issues, which begin on page 34. The first issue is about the Office of Legislative Audit's concerns over SHA's federal fund accounting. Since fiscal 2021, MDOT has maximized its use of federal funds. Exhibit 18 shows how federal funds have grown as a major source of funding for SHA's state system construction equipment program. Since fiscal 2021, federal funds have outpaced state funds. OLA's audit found that SHA had expended $358.7 million in federal funds above the initial authorized amount that had yet to be recovered. OLA also noted in its review of budget closeout transactions for fiscal 2025, SHA could not provide documentation to support federal fund entries of $600 million. As of January 30th of 2026, SHA has collected $592.9 million in federal funds in fiscal 2026. SHA should discuss how much of this total is for initial authorized amounts, how much is for overages, as well as whether these funds are only for fiscal 2026 or also for other fiscal years. The next issue begins on page 35. It's also related to federal funds. Recent federal actions have led to an instability in federal transportation dollars. Those actions have included Executive Order 14154 that paused the disbursements of funds authorized by the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, or IIJA, and the Inflation Reduction Act. While those funds were restored by a judge, the One Big Beautiful Bill Act rescinded unobligated Inflation Reduction Act funds, and in December, Maryland joined 16 other states to access IIJA funds for the Charging and Fueling Infrastructure Program and the Electric Vehicle Charger Reliability and Accessibility Accelerator Program. USDOT suspended previously approved State National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure, or NEVI plans, leading to a lawsuit, State of Washington versus USDOT, in May 2025. In January 2026, a federal judge ruled in favor of plaintiffs. However, the recently passed federal fiscal 2026 appropriations bill transferred $879 million in unobligated NEVI funds to other federal highway administration programs. USDOT also looked at tying transportation funds to immigration enforcement compliance, issuing a letter making compliance with federal immigration laws a precondition to receive transportation funds, which has been blocked by a federal judge. SHA should address how it's navigating the new federal environment and how it's planning to account for the lack of stability from its federal partners. On page 37 are the recommended actions. The operating budget recommendation is to adopt narrative for a report on the recovery of federal fund reimbursements. The pay goal recommendation is to add language for specificity for the contingent language in the budget bill. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Norton. And Madam Secretary, please go ahead, and then we'll be
For the
followed by
record,
Dr. Pines.
I'm Katie Thompson, Acting Secretary of Transportation, and I'm joined today by State Highway Administrator Will Pines. Thank you again for the opportunity to be here today to discuss the State Highway Administration budget, and thank you to Kelly Norton for her review of the department's budget. The Maryland Department of Transportation is serious about safety in everything that we do, and I think you'll hear that more in the testimony from Mr. Pines in a moment. But as Acting Secretary, I've charged each mode to effectively take every reasonable action necessary to reduce safety risks with proactive, data-driven, and strategic safety-focused decisions and investments, all with the goal of bending roadway fatalities in the state to zero. I'm happy to report that SHA is leading the way with data-driven safety solutions, advancing critical programs such as the Pedestrian Safety Action Plan and Vulnerable Road User Safety Assessment, which have identified the highest risk corridors across the state. Similarly, SHA is advancing numerous critical large infrastructure projects like I-81 in Washington County and US 15 in Frederick County. These will improve safety, mobility, and drive economic growth in the region. In addition to SHA's capital investments, the agency has robust routine and winter maintenance operations, as we experienced in mid-January. And of course, we've had quite an extraordinary winter, although today would be no indication of that. I want to express my deepest gratitude to the men and women of SHA that have worked day and night during several of our recent snow events to keep our roads safe, but all the work they do year-round to maintain and improve road safety. In closing, I want to thank the leadership of Governor Moore and the last legislature last session for restoring necessary transportation funding. SHA's budget will address critical state of good repair needs, improve safety, and support economic growth and development across the state. Now I'll turn it over to Administrator Pines to provide some additional information and address the DLS analysis.
Well, thank you, Madam Secretary, and good afternoon, Chair Watson and members of the committee. For the record, I'm Will Pines, State Highway Administrator, and thank you for the opportunity to be here today to discuss State Highway's budget. I also want to echo the Secretary's gratitude for Kelly's work for this year's budget review, on top of getting through it all very quickly at today's hearing. The State Highway is serious about safety, and our budget projects and values reflect that. SHA continues to advance critical projects and programs that enhance safety for all users, invest in the current and future needs of Maryland's multimodal transportation system, while also strengthening Maryland's economy and opportunities. SHA's $7.8 billion consolidated transportation program budget for fiscal years 2026 through 2031 enables SHA to invest in critical infrastructure needs across the state. You will note that this is a $1 billion increase from SHA's FY25 through 30 CTP, which is due to the additional federal funds in the program that align with the state funds that the legislature approved last session. Each dollar, state and federal, will be strategically invested in Maryland's highway system to create safer roads and strengthen our communities. Nearly 80% of SHA's capital investments are in system preservation, totaling $6.2 billion over the 6-year. This funding is used to support state-of-good repair work for bridges, roadway resurfacing, and safety-focused projects like those in our Pedestrian Safety Action Plan. The other 20% is programmed to our major projects, totaling $1.6 billion across the 6 years. That will allow SHA to advance construction and project development on our large infrastructure investments like I-81, US 15, Maryland 97, and I-97, and necessary planning and evaluation work on the American Legion Bridge. Thanks to the governor and the legislature's leadership last year in providing additional revenues, SHA was able to invest in the department's Complete Streets initiative by advancing work on all 23 high-risk safety corridors identified in our Pedestrian Safety Action Plan, and continue to deliver critical safety improvements for communities like the US 1 at Dr. Patel intersection enhancements, which are scheduled to be completed this spring. And of course, SHA was able to fully fund critical investments across the state, like $197 million for US 15 in Frederick County, $175 million for I-81 in Washington County, nearly $50 million for Maryland 97 in Montgomery County, and nearly $33 million for Maryland 5 Great Mills in St. Mary's County. Currently, construction of the $269 million Maryland 4 at Suitland Parkway interchange project in Prince George's County is underway and is estimated to be completed in 2029. The $192 million I-695 Transportation System Management and Operation, or TSMO project, is also in construction, as anticipated to open the first segment in 2027, and the second will become fully operational in 2028. Once completed, this project will address 6 of the top 15 most congested roadway segments in Maryland and yield time savings both during the AM and PM peak periods. Turning to SHA's System Preservation Program, as I previously mentioned, this is where most of SHA's budget is programmed. Over the next 6 years, we will be investing nearly $1.4 billion in bridge rehabilitation, over $1.4 billion in pavement and resurfacing, $463 million in safety and spot improvements, which is where that funding is that's programmed for our pedestrian safety needs, $240 million for sidewalk construction, and $208 million for system drainage improvements. SHA has strategically invested each dollar to maintain a state of good repair. However, there are still significant funds needed to ensure our system is equipped for the future needs. We're also advancing our climate goals by partly continuing to deploy electric vehicle chargers statewide through the NEVI program. We've obligated over $19 million for 31 sites that will deliver 166 new DC fast charging ports from Western Maryland to Ocean City, with 6 sites already open since last fall. Next week, we launch our 3rd procurement round to build Maryland's major alternative fuel corridors. To successfully deliver on projects, programs, and investments I just discussed, we also need a well-trained workforce that's dedicated to today's needs and prepared to face the challenges of our future. Year over year, SHA has continued to invest in our team to build a culture of pride, service, and expertise with the goal of being nationwide industry leaders in transportation. Our current vacancy rate is 5.2%, and we have maintained an average of 5.5% vacancy rate over the past year. In the past 2 years, we've sent nearly 175 employees through internal and external leadership development programs. And before addressing DLS's recommendations, I'd like to take the opportunity to address SHA's audit findings from the Department of Legislative Audit's report issued in September of 2025. First, SHA appreciates the work of the auditors who work collaboratively and efficiently with our team. SHA recognizes the importance of this process to ensure transparent and responsible use of state resources. The primary finding of the audit found that SHA charged $359 million in project expenses to federal projects, which were for expenditures that were not authorized by Federal Highway. As noted in our response to the audit, SHA has followed all federally approved accounting practices when processing expenditures for federal projects. SHA has successfully brought our balance of federal receivables down to under $300 million and is continuing to work collaboratively with our federal partners to recover all eligible expenses. It's important to note that our receivable balance is always on a rolling basis and will never be zero, as we continue to incur costs that advance our capital program, which is heavily reliant on federal dollars. So how'd we get here? In 2020, the COVID-19 pandemic and record levels of inflation put pressure on the state transportation revenues available in the Transportation Trust Fund. At that time, MDOT made significant cuts to the budget and made the strategic decision to leverage every available federal dollar to preserve the active construction program and critical projects that were in development. Referring to our presentation on slide 13 and putting this into perspective, in fiscal year 2019, SHA's capital program was $816 million in state funds and $492 million in federal funds. So pre-COVID, over 60% of SHA's funding makeup was state funding. Less than 40% was federal. In fiscal year 2025, the state share dropped to $204 million, or by $204 million, to a total of $288 million. And the federal share was $683 million. In other words, post-COVID funding has flipped the balance of funding, where today over 70% of SHA's funding is federal funding. So 60% state funding before to today 70% federal funding. With that shift, the amount of federally funded projects in the capital program has increased as SHA's programmed over $3.1 billion in total federal funds over the past 5 years. The significant increase in federally funded projects has also increased the work volume necessary to manage the federal actions. In 2019, SHA processed 32 federal actions to advance project authorizations. In contrast, in 2024, we processed 410 federal actions, or a 1,182% increase in the work volume. While the workload increased to ensure that we were effectively advancing projects, the internal resources, staffing, and systems needed to process those actions remained the same. We identified this need and since 2023 have taken actions to tool our federal aid team with the necessary resources to process federal reimbursements. SHA is committed to putting the appropriate corrective actions in place by late 2026, as was noted in our agency response to the audit. The FY27 budget also includes 8 new positions for SHA, and those requested positions are a critical part of our strategy to manage the additional federal workload. We respectfully request your approval for these 8 positions so that we can fully address the OLA audit findings. SHA also concurs with the operating budget recommendation regarding the committee narrative on federal reimbursements. As you can see in our presentation, SHA is focused on improving project and program delivery in our published strategic plan, and we're making organizational-wide improvements, including addressing these audit findings. Now, turning to the DLS recommendations. First, as it relates to the 2025 metrics on congestion, SHA estimates that 242.5 million annual person hours of delay were incurred and 14% of unreliable travel time, which is slightly higher than the numbers from 2024 that were provided in the DLS analysis. I'd like to address the rescission of unobligated federal funds under the One Big Beautiful Bill Act. SHA was unable to pursue the innovative work due to that was really set up to reduce greenhouse gas emissions through low carbon materials that was planned through that $32 million low carbon transportation materials grant. However, we were able to cover the loss of the $3.3 million neighborhood access and equity grant for the safety project in Easton using SHA safety and spot improvement funding and highway safety improvement program funding, which is a different bucket of federal funds than the grant funding we had previously received. For the town of Berlin pedestrian safety project, we were able to get $250,000 of the $950,000 from the grant under agreement and obligated, which will be used for the town's project feasibility study. To cover the gap and advance future project development phases, SHA was able to repurpose $463,000 from an unused federal earmark, with the town providing the $128,000 in local match that's necessary. The Office of Attorney General is also taking actions to address concerns with the administration's positions on immigration and the environment, and MDOT is providing the OAG with all requested information to support those suits. Despite the federal landscape, SHA continues to receive federal formula appropriations that enable us to advance critical infrastructure projects across Maryland. SHA has also continued to maintain a collaborative and positive working relationship with our federal partners at the Federal Highway Administration. As it relates to the $10 million in special funds for highway safety operating for the Work Zone Safety Program, this is not new operating budget to SHA, and rather is simply a change in how the department presents the revenues and distributions since the passage of the Road Worker Protection Act. This was appropriate to provide more transparency to the use of program revenues collected under the new tiered fine structure and to demonstrate new flow of revenue distribution. In regard to our winter maintenance budget, SHA will exceed the fiscal year 2026 budget due to more severe snow events in January 2026. As of March 2nd, 2026, SHA's winter expenses are at $101.3 million, or $37.1 million over budget. The winter budget is based on a 5-year rolling average of actual expenses. Moving forward, MDOT will set its winter budget to at least the 5-year average, but it will set it higher if deemed necessary. To cover the additional FY26 spending, MDOT will rely on underspending in other modes or the operating budget contingency that the department maintains. In closing, MDOT also agrees with DLS's recommendation to modify the language in the budget bill regarding the $10 million in CEF funding. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Secretary Thompson, and we are happy to take any questions you may have.
Thank you. It's been an expensive year for MDOT in terms of snow when you add up all the different modes and the amounts under budgeted. But I'm confident you will figure that out, and you'll let us know if you can't.
We have it's happened before,
Yeah,
and we have in the past.
It sounds like you have been budgeting the 5-year average, though, which is good.
Yes, we are following the protocols. It's just when it doesn't follow past the weather is different
Right.
from what we've seen the past 5 years.
For this agency, that's good. And we want to make sure we do that for all of our agencies going forward. Do we have any questions for SHA members? Delegate Harrison.
Thank you. I had a few small little notes here. First thing that I want to say is congratulations for not having any repeat findings on your audit.
Thank you.
I think that's probably the first one that I've seen, so I want to congratulate you on that, and I expect that the next time you won't have any as well.
Absolutely, do our best.
Quick question on page 11, the road maintenance, equipment rental, and supplies and materials for snow removal. Are those both together? The road maintenance to deal with potholes and that type of thing, and extra equipment for snow removal?
No, they are separate. The road maintenance equipment, that's for things like tree and brush removal and other types of equipment needed throughout our facilities. The supplies and materials for snow removal really are limited to that.
Okay. There was an allocation for full interchange at the Greenbelt Metro Station in anticipation of the FBI. And because that is up in the air, what's the story with that now? Has work already begun? What's the status of that? And do we need to reevaluate?
Okay, so the GEO bonds remain in the capital program for the FBI headquarters. Obviously, there's a lot involved with the lawsuit. State Highway, we were advancing design on the project prior to that. However, it's necessary. The project is a partnership between GSA, WMATA, Prince George's County, other local entities, the planning departments, and we really need continued collaboration at the federal level and with all of those entities on clarity of what the future transit-oriented development will be at the site. We're not really able to advance design until that happens, and so the GEO bonds are there while the suit is progressing, and we're very hopeful that all of that will work out and FBI will be built there. In the interim, we're really not able to advance design, but are continuing to have conversations to help understand the future.
Okay. On page 19, there's a bicycle retrofit, and I was just curious as to exactly what that is. It's a project under the Safety, Congestion Relief Highway and Bridge.
Yep. So we do have a number of facilities where bicycle amenities do not exist, and we do try to retrofit and help support multimodal transportation throughout our system. So we have dedicated funding for, there's things like the Kim Lanphier Trails Program that deals with trails, there's Rec Trails funding, there's different pots of money. The bicycle retrofit is really to promote bike multimodal transportation.
Okay. And then the last question that I had, and you addressed it a little bit, was the projects. Oftentimes you do projects, highway projects, and it would be a reimbursement under the federal grants. And just wondering, can you just go into that just a little bit more, where we are, because we really don't know what's going to happen. And I think some projects have already been started. Some may just be in planning stages.
Sure. Thanks for the question. This is a complicated topic, probably longer than you want to get into, but I'll try to keep it as high level as I can. So it was actually said under the MDTA analysis about how all federal projects are on a reimbursement basis. We're in the same boat. And so there's two things to consider. One is our expenditures are on reimbursement, and our budget is allocated and metered out through continuing resolutions typically. We don't, while the federal government gives us a budget to work for, we don't get it all in one pot. And so they have what they call advanced construction that allows us to get a pre-authorization for a project even though they haven't given us the budget to do it yet, and for us to incur expenses against that pre-authorization that then once we have the budget available, then we can seek reimbursement in place. And so that's kind of the full process of that, and why when we talk about the audit, that's really what the auditors are highlighting, is that the size of the amount of funding that we still have owed for reimbursement has grown rather large. When we're asking for those additional PINs, it's to help us process them more quickly. We do, however, in our state dollar budget, include non-participation costs as an estimate, so that in the event that any funds are not reimbursable to us for things like Buy America, Build America provision, if we use materials that don't meet the federal requirements, we sometimes have to, then we have budget allocated to try to deal with and offset those ineligible expenses. So
outside of that, are you pretty confident that we will get the reimbursements that are guaranteed?
We're actively pursuing those eligible costs as the budget is provided to us from the federal government, and we believe that the budget that we have should put us in a pretty good place. So, but
the other thing I would add is that there's certain programs that the federal government has targeted either to pull back funds or not to continue to provide funds. And those include electrification for vehicles and some of the climate-related programs that they had. But otherwise, it's pretty much business as usual with federal highways, and the working relationship that we have with federal highways, the district staff, and even at headquarters remains strong. So absent some new development, we feel like we're on pretty firm footing with the Federal Highway Administration.
Okay, thank you. That's good to hear. And Delegate Spiegel.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good to see you both again. As you know, this subcommittee has been focused on a continuing discussion about the process for deficiency appropriations. The chair sort of also already shined a spotlight on the issue of snow removal budgeting. But I wanted to ask you about another deficiency appropriation that I saw in the analysis. This is electricity costs for roadway lighting. $2.6 million in funds for increased electricity costs for roadway lighting under the state maintenance program. And I'm just wondering if you can expand on the story behind this deficiency appropriation and how it came to be.
Sure, no problem. So PEPCO had a suit brought against them to the Public Service Commission under case number 9706, and that required PEPCO to go out and inventory and define the ownership of all unmetered street lighting. Through that process, they identified numerous lights that had never been inventoried and never been billed to any owners, local jurisdictions or the state. We had been working with them, and PEPCO reviewed the lighting and provided State Highway with a list of 11,318 street lights that they had inventoried. We reviewed all of those lights against state law and our lighting policy, and in good faith accepted responsibility for approximately 730 new lease lights that we previously had not been billed for. That our prior bill had only been for 1,336 lights. However, we have disputed 5,188 lease lights that we believe will likely fall to local jurisdictions' responsibility for ownership. We've been constructively meeting with them in discussions in relation to those lights. So we went from having bills for 1,336 lights to a new total of 8,066 lease lights. If we do not pay the bills for those lights, we do anticipate that they would be no longer serviced, and that can be a safety issue for roadways. So that would, our prior bills were around $500,000 annually. This raises it by $2.5 million for the additional lighting. 0.1 million of that total that you mentioned was actually for another deficiency for Oracle software related to a coordination with the Secretary's office on renewing an Oracle product.
Okay. Is PEPCO attempting to back bill SHA for those lights, or it's just forward billing going forward?
It's forward. The Public Service Commission case did not allow them to bill any of their customers in reverse for lighting that hadn't been identified, but it does require us to take responsibility for lights in good faith that we are utilizing service on and that we previously had not been billed for.
Okay, and all of those lights, I assume, through this process are now being inventoried and tracked, each of those lampposts or whatever?
They created an entire GIS layer that showed all of the lighting. It had pictures of it, and our staff went light by light and reviewed every single one of them.
Okay. With the chair's indulgence, I have a few other questions I'd like to ask.
Yeah, let me just add to that real quick on the lighting. And you were in my office last week and explained that to me. You know, that's I think, an example of an appropriate deficiency appropriation. And, you know, it's something that comes up like that you really, maybe you could have predicted there was a case, but at the end of the day, you didn't know how it was going to impact you. So we appreciate your explanation on that. And Delegate Siegel.
Thank you. I wanted to ask you also about monitoring of overtime expenses. We saw that in the September 2025 audit, there was some question raised about analyzing overtime to identify employees with consistently high levels of overtime pay. And it looks like the fiscal year 2027 allowance actually has a decrease of about $3 million in overtime pay. And just wondering if that's connected to the audit findings, or if you're making any changes in terms of overtime practices.
No, so kind of two separate issues. The audit wasn't in relation to our overall budget around overtime. It was around individual people having high usage of overtime. We have reviewed those individuals. One of the things that we've started doing is issuing a report to management that summarizes all of their overtime usage. And we're going back through time cards and tracking it. And we've issued reports now that once an individual reaches 50% of their salary, that we will begin to evaluate if there is excessive overtime. We do, if you can actually look in our presentation I'll get you the slide number here in a second. The department has had a substantial reduction in positions over time. Back in 1995, we were an agency just under 4,000 positions. We're down to less than 3,000, and the majority of those cuts in positions have been in our maintenance workers. So we do leverage a lot of overtime for, emergencies like trees falling in the roadway. Somebody has to go out in the middle of the night and cut them up and get them out of the road, those types of things. But related to the audit finding, we have both started to issue new reports. And the biggest element of the audit finding was just that we had disparate practices between our statewide offices. We had 28 maintenance shops, 7 district office, Hanover headquarters, a lot of different staff. We did not have a centralized single overtime policy. That is, we drafted a document that is in place, but it's being revised through the management to make sure that it's consistent statewide right now.
One final question.
Let me just follow up on that. When did you have 4,000 employees? What year did you say?
Give me 1 second. I got to find my presentation.
Roughly.
I got a lot of files open. I want to say it was 1994. Give me a second and I'll find it.
And you've decreased by 1,000 employees
Correct.
to this point in time?
Yes.
It's incredible.
If you go to our presentation, it is on slide 10 of our presentation. In 1994, we had 3,887 positions. In the 2027 budget, we have 2,917. And the majority of those reductions were in our maintenance workers.
And we have more miles of roadway.
Today, we have a lot more miles of roadway, yes.
Go ahead, Delegate Spiegel. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just one last question, and I will acknowledge this is a bit of a hypothetical, so I apologize if it's a kind of a gotcha, and if you want to follow up offline. But in fiscal year 2027, the formula set in statute for highway user revenues continues at the same level that it is for fiscal year 2026. But after fiscal year 2027, starting in 2028, it's set to drop pretty significantly by statute. I'm just wondering if the agency has started to think about contingency plans related to that, and if hypothetically the General Assembly were to delay that drop in percentage, how you would deal with that in terms of budgeting. Is there a plan to do that? Are you in a position to be capable to do that, or would we need to revisit how to handle the budgeting for that amount?
I can take that. Thank you for your question, Delegate Spiegel. We are very much aware that the highway user revenue drops off after FY27. We are having internal conversations about the implications of that. We know there have been discussions and some legislation floated in the General Assembly that would deal with that. The bottom line for us is that maintaining the funding for the Transportation Trust Fund, both for cities and counties, but also for us to be able to continue to invest in state of good repair and capital improvements at the state level. And that's necessarily going to require a difficult conversation of potentially viable funding options, and how we strike the right balance across the state with counties and communities. So more to come on that.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Any other questions for State Highway? All right. We appreciate your time today, and we do have a couple of people signed up to testify. We have Juan K, and then we have Amanda Allen. And you can both come forward. Good afternoon. You may begin.
Okay. Good afternoon, Madam Chair Watson and members of the committee. My name is Juan Carter. I work as a transportation engineer and technician with the State Highway Administration. I'm also a proud member of ASHME, Local 1803, where I'm also the vice president, which represents state employees in Anne Arundel County. In my role, I'm responsible for overseeing and holding accountable state contractors that work on facilities such as bridges, highways, buildings, ramps, and roadways for MDOT. We are essential employees that must be available for 24-hour emergency call-ups with response times in less than 1 hour. Our jobs are challenging, but I love what I do and important work we do for the Marylanders who use our transportation infrastructure. A key issue we have within our agency is our aging fleet of trucks. The trucks we use are for essential functions such as snow removal, picking up debris after storms. Many of our trucks need to be replaced. For example, we have trucks on our fleet that have over 230,000 miles. During a large snowstorm in January, only 10 of the 22 trucks at our Annapolis shop were available for work. Some trucks were out of service due to maintenance issues. Some trucks can push snow but no salt. Others could drop salt but couldn't push. As a result, we had to rely heavily on contractors because less than 50% of our fleet was available for the storm. We must invest in our equipment in a timely manner so that state employees can perform state services and save our state money. Additionally, we struggle with retention of veteran employees at our shop. Many veteran employees are leaving our agency to go work for other federal, local government agencies or private industry. We must invest in our state employees. State Highway Administration workers are essential. We're the ones who maintain our state's critical infrastructure. Our economy is dependent upon a healthy infrastructure that can safely and efficiently move people and goods throughout our state. Investing in our state employees is investing in economic growth. Please support our Fair Compensation Act for state employees. I thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Carter, and I do apologize. Your name came out CA on my sign-up sheet. But we have you down, and we appreciate your testimony. Thanks so much.
Well, thank you.
Then we have Amanda Allen.
Hi, good afternoon, Chair Watson and members of the committee. I'm Amanda Allen with HNTB, a national infrastructure solutions firm that proudly employs over 300 professionals in the Capital Region and has an office strategically located in downtown Baltimore. For more than a century, our firm has collaborated with transportation agencies across the nation to deliver planning, design, construction management, financing, community engagement, and operational solutions that support safer travel, better mobility, and stronger economic outcomes. As our firm continues to grow and invest in Maryland, we are expanding our Baltimore presence into a larger office, reflecting both our commitment to our people and our confidence in Maryland's transportation program. A stable and predictable transportation budget is essential to long-term planning, both for the state and for industry partners. For SHA in particular, predictability allows us to prepare for the complex work ahead, invest in staff, and ensure that we have technical expertise needed to deliver high-quality, resilient infrastructure across Maryland. We also appreciate SHA's continued advancement of major regional priorities, such as the planned replacement of the American Legion Bridge and improvements along the I-495, I-270 corridor. Investments that will modernize one of the region's most critical connections, enhancing safety, mobility, and multimodal access. A strong SHA program ensures Maryland can deliver the reliable transportation network residents depend on every day. For these reasons, we respectfully request your support of this budget. Thank you for the opportunity to testify, and we look forward to continuing our partnership with you.
Thank you. We appreciate you both being here. And I believe that concludes our testimony for SHA. So, members, we will move on to the Department of Information Technology. And we have Ms. Ray with us here from Department of Legislative Services, and you may begin.
Thank you, Madam Chair, committee members. I am Yashodhara Rai, and I'll be presenting the fiscal 27 budget analysis for the Department of Information Technology, or DOIT. Cover chart on page 1 shows that DOIT's fiscal 27 budget increases by $4.6 million, or 0.9%. This is after accounting for planned reversion. The fiscal 27 budget includes $58 million in federal funds for the new Maryland Benefits Program, which was transferred from DHS and MDH beginning fiscal 26. Moving on to performance analysis, Exhibit 1 on page 6 shows that cybersecurity indicators were in an upward trend in fiscal 25. DOIT also began reporting the number of security incident tickets received and investigated by the Security Operations Center under the Office of Security Management beginning fiscal 23. The number of security incident tickets received in fiscal 25 decreased by 58.3% from fiscal 24, and DOIT should comment on the contributing factors that lowered the number of security incident tickets. Exhibit 2 on page 8 shows that all 3 major IT project indicators dropped in fiscal 25, reaching the lowest level between fiscal 2020 and fiscal 25. Last year, in the budget hearing testimony, DOIT explained that procurement delays and inaccurate schedule estimates contributed to lowered MITDP performance measures. To improve this, DOIT is working with the Office of State Procurement. Also, in fiscal 26, DOIT established the MITDP Oversight Division in accordance with Chapters 845 and 846 of 2025. In order to standardize, monitor, and support the implementation of the IT projects and expedited projects. DOIT should comment on its efforts to address declining major IT performance measures. Exhibit 3 on page 9 indicates that about 103,000 service desk tickets were received in fiscal 25. Of these, 84% were resolved by first contact and 75% were resolved in 24 hours. 2 indicators, average IT cost per full-time equivalent and the percent of IT service rate within the average industry benchmarks were added in the 2024 MFR submission. The average IT cost per full-time equivalent increased to about $14,000 in fiscal 25 from $13,500 in fiscal 24. The 2025 MFR submission does not include data for the percentage of IT service rate within the average industry benchmark. DOIT notes that no data is reported due to the unavailability of funds to conduct an annual study by a third-party vendor. In the fiscal 26 budget testimony, DOIT had noted that it was assessing alternative ways to collect this data without annual vendor engagement, and DOIT should brief the committees if an alternative way for data collection have been identified. There is a planned reversion of $1.4 million related to the savings identified through the Government Modernization Initiative in fiscal 27 allowance. This includes $1.1 million in savings from modifying the laptop replacement schedule from 3 years to 5 years, and about $260,000 in savings from the new renegotiated Motorola contract for the radio program. Exhibit 4 on page 11 shows an overview of the fiscal 27 allowance. Maryland Benefits and IT Investment Fund, ITIF, accounts for a total of 49.4% of the total allowance. Exhibit 5 on page 12 shows fiscal 27 allowance split by objects. 84.2% of the fiscal 27 allowance accounts for contractual services related to ITIF, Maryland Benefits, operations, and cybersecurity. Exhibit 6 on page 13 presents fiscal 27 allowance by fund sources. Exhibit 7 on pages 14 and 15 highlights the proposed budget changes. The largest increase of about $11 million is due to the net increase of 91 contractual full-time equivalent expenses. This is discussed in the personnel section. This is partially offset by a decrease of $4.2 million for Maryland Benefits Program, about $4.2 million decrease in reimbursable funds for major IT projects, and a decrease of about $3.6 million in funding for cybersecurity assessments. Beginning at the bottom of page 15 through page 22, we discuss major IT projects and ITIF. In accordance with language in last year's budget bill, DOIT submitted a draft eligibility criteria for an expedited project, which is listed on page 16. The fiscal 27 allowance includes $3 million in general funds in ITIF for expedited projects. Because the eligibility criteria for an expedited project has not been finalized and a proposed list of projects that may potentially be expedited projects is not available, DLS recommends deleting the $3 million in general funds for expedited projects. Page 17 discusses the new Measure IT Project Oversight Division established as per Chapters 845 and 846. This division includes two teams, the Discovery Team and the Intervention Team, and the fiscal 27 allowance includes $3.5 million in IT for 10 discovery sprints, and also includes $5 million to support 16 intervention teams. DOIT should comment on how it will prioritize Measure IT projects that require assistance from these teams, and should provide a list of potential projects where these teams will be deployed in fiscal 27. Also beginning fiscal 27, DOIT has consolidated oversight funding. The fiscal 27 budget includes a total of $4.3 million for oversight operations for all major IT projects in DOIT's portfolio. This includes $4 million for oversight staffing and $250,000 for oversight operations. DOIT should comment on how many positions the $4 million will support, and to what extent will the new oversight division assist in mitigating the problems related to incorrect scope and cost estimates for the major IT projects. Exhibit 8 on page 18 shows the ITIF fund transactions from fiscal 24 through 27. And as you can see, ITIF is mainly funded through general funds. Exhibit 9 on page 20 shows the trends for general fund appropriation in ITIF over the last decade. Fiscal 27 budget is about 94% higher than fiscal 25, mostly due to the higher general fund appropriation for the comptroller's 3 major IT projects as they enter procurement and implementation phases. There are 4 new projects included in fiscal 27 allowance that receives ITIF. Each major IT project receiving ITIF must submit an information technology project request, ITPR, which is then shared with DLS. However, an ITPR for DOIT's new statewide permitting platform project was not provided, and DLS recommends deleting $500,000 for this project. DLS recommendations for agency IT projects appear in their respective agency's budget analysis, summary of which also appears on page 21. One additional recommendation is made for the new Medicaid pharmacy benefits claim system that deletes $1.5 million for this project, as it is expected to receive 90% match from federal funds. The bottom of page 21 discusses that the governor's fiscal 27 budget books do not include out-year funding and cost estimates for major IT projects beginning fiscal 28. These out-year projections have been historically provided with the governor's budget books and are required to estimate the state's general fund projection, because ITIF is primarily funded through general funds. DLS recommends adopting a narrative that DOIT, in collaboration with DBM, provide out-year projections with the submission of the governor's fiscal 28 budget books. The last discussion on ITIF is the deficiency appropriation on page 22. The fiscal 27 allowance includes approximately $1 million in general funds as fiscal 26 deficiency appropriation for the State Board of Elections major IT project. Because general funds for major IT projects are budgeted in ITIF within DOIT's budget and are distributed to the requesting agency as reimbursable funds, this requirement also applies to any deficiency appropriations for major IT project. DOIT and DBM should ensure that deficiency appropriations are correctly budgeted in ITIF beginning in fiscal 28. And DOIT should comment on how it will coordinate with SBE to ensure that it maintains oversight of the IT project. Pages 22 through 25 discuss personnel data. The fiscal 27 allowance includes 11 new regular positions. Of these, 9 positions will support developing and procuring technology solutions to improve digital services, and 2 positions will support establishing a technical procurement team as required by Chapter 601 of 2025. DLS recommends increasing turnover expectancy for the 11 new positions to 25%, which are supported with general funds. The fiscal 27 allowance also includes 91 new contractual FTEs, which is shown in Exhibit 10 on page 23. 86 positions were previously funded through contracts and are being transitioned to state contractuals to generate savings and reduce dependency on external vendors. DOIT should comment on how much savings these transitions will generate, and the remaining 5 positions are new contractual full-time equivalents who will support the technical procurement team. As of December 31st, 2025, DOIT reported 34 vacant positions, of which 8 positions have been vacant for less than 6 months, 5 positions have been vacant for more than a year, and 21 positions have never been filled. Exhibit 11 on page 24 shows the status of the 21 positions that have never been filled. Moving on to the first issue on page 26, Chapter 242 of 2022 expanded and enhanced the state's regulatory framework for state and local government cybersecurity and requires OSM to submit an annual report on its key accomplishments. As of February 21st, 2026, the report had not been submitted. Exhibit 12 on page 27 shows the funds for various cybersecurity efforts across the state agencies in fiscal 27 allowance. Chapter 242 also requires DOIT to conduct external statewide cybersecurity assessments at least once every 2 years. The second assessment was required to be conducted during calendar 2024. However, DOIT notes that challenges with contract structure and cost concerns deferred the assessments to fourth quarter of fiscal 26. Technical evaluation of proposals from contractors is currently in progress. Also, we wanted to highlight that the fiscal 25 budget included $28 million in general funds for cybersecurity assessments. Only $3.1 million was expended in fiscal 25 for cybersecurity assessments. At the fiscal 25 closeout, $8 million was reverted due to several cyber procurements that were not completed, which still leaves a balance of $16.9 million that is not accounted for. DOIT should clarify the utilization of this balance. Exhibit 13 on pages 28 and 29 presents the status of the remediation actions that were identified during the first cybersecurity assessments conducted during calendar 2022 and 2023. DOIT should comment on the estimated funding requirements to ensure that these remediation actions are always deployed and operational. The second issue on pages 29 and 30 focuses on the artificial intelligence, AI. DOIT launched the Maryland Data Academy to create opportunities for state employees to better understand how data influences and drives AI solutions. As of February 2026, there are 8 agencies and 40 representatives actively participating in the available training coursework. The program is scheduled to be fully launched in spring 2026. The AI study roadmap that was published last year listed various study topics to understand the evolving needs of the industry, explore the uses of generative AI related to the state's workforce, and prioritize state actions, policies, and practices. According to DOIT, agencies are in the process of submitting their findings, and the governor's office who will determine the next steps to leverage them as internal strategy. DLS recommends adopting a narrative for a report on the state's AI efforts and the progress. The report should also highlight the estimated costs and timeline for implementing the efforts identified, and also how successful implementation of AI can be measured or tracked. The third issue appears on page 30 and discusses the transfer of Maryland benefits from MDH and DHS to DOIT beginning fiscal 26. Previously, MDH was the operator of this platform that provides application services to multiple state agencies. With the increase in users over time and to ensure continued integration across multiple agencies and identify efficiencies, the Board of Public Works approved a reimbursable fund amendment to transfer this platform to DOIT, who is now the operator and is responsible for day-to-day operations of Maryland benefits, which includes the shared platform and the eligibility and enrollment application. 2 applications that are solely used by DHS, the Child Juvenile and Adult Management System and the Child Support Management System, are to remain with DHS. However, DHS has reported that operational duties for CJAMS and CSMS are still integrated with the Maryland Benefits Shared Platform and are currently with DOIT. Both DOIT and DHS estimate separating the applications by the end of fiscal 2026. DOIT should brief the committees on the reason for the continued integration of operational duties for these 2 applications, the impact of the continued integration, and its contingency plans to ensure that the applications are accessible to the users if the estimated separation of the applications extend beyond fiscal 26. DLS also recommends adopting a narrative requesting a report on the progress of the shared platform, including the cost, implementation progress, and additional efficiencies identified. The fourth issue begins on page 31 and notes that the contract for the Project Management Information System, PMIS, was terminated in fiscal 25. The PMIS is used to track an IT project's progress through ITPRs, and due to the termination of the contract, DOIT used the Google platform and tools to support the fiscal 27 funding request cycle. However, Google platform cannot sustain the state's requirement, and so DOIT should comment on the RFP timeline for a new PMIS vendor and its contingency plan for the fiscal 28 funding request cycle if a new contract is not awarded on time. Pages 33 through 35 are DLS recommended actions. Recommendation 1 deletes general funds for expedited projects. Recommendation 2 deletes general funds for the new MDH major IT project. Recommendation 3 deletes general fund for DOIT's statewide permitting platform project. Recommendations 4 and 5 increase budgeted turnover for new positions to 25%. Recommendations 6 through 8 request various reports. Pages 36 through 51 are appendices. On page 36, DLS notes that DOIT has not submitted 3 reports as of February 2026 and should brief the committees on when they expect to submit the reports. This concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. That was an incredibly thorough analysis, and we appreciate your work on that. And with us from the Department of Information Technology, we have Secretary Savage and...
Sorry, for the record, Nikki Pletzer, Director of Budget for DOIT.
Fantastic, thank you. And you may proceed.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the subcommittee. My name is Katie Savage. I'm the Secretary at the Department of Information Technology. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to provide this testimony to the committee. And thank you, Yasho, for your diligent work as always on our analysis. We have provided written responses to all of their requests and would like to take this opportunity to highlight the progress DOIT has made this past year. Over the last year, DOIT has demonstrated our ability to support our sister agencies with effective internal IT services that are helping them become more secure, efficient, and accessible. In August of 2025, we released the State of Maryland's IT Master Plan, which outlines a bold vision to transform how the state operates, builds, and buys IT services and systems. Everything we do and everything IT leaders across the state do is in accordance with this plan. One key part of the plan I want to highlight is the need for the state to bring more IT expertise in-house. When I first joined as secretary, our agency had no in-house modern software development roles focused on things like product management, engineering, user experience, or accessibility. The Office of Security Management, which creates and implements cybersecurity programs, policies, and service for the state, had just 3 state employees. Over the past year, we have grown our teams substantially. OSM alone is nearly 30 people. And we have helped several of our sister agencies hire highly qualified and effective chief information officers of their own. Yet even as we have grown the team, we have kept our budget basically flat. You can hear in Yasha's analysis, 0.9%. And we've even reverted $1 million back to the general funds through the governor's modernization initiative. One way that we have achieved this is by insourcing and converting contractors to state contractual employees. Approximately 50% of DOIT's operating budget consists of contract services. In FY25 alone, DOIT converted contractors in infrastructure and security operations, resulting in a savings of $4.7 million. In FY26, we have focused on converting contractors identified in the Maryland benefits programs, security operations, and data enterprise, resulting in $2.65 million in savings to date. Another way we have achieved cost savings is through the efforts of our enterprise platform services team. By centralizing our identity access management and consolidating cybersecurity tools, we have identified $16 million in fiscal year savings, 26 savings, which we're investing into other IT priorities. We have also secured $1.2 million in annual cost reduction by consolidating Microsoft Unified Support Services. Our agency hasn't just grown in size over the past year, it has grown in impact. We released Maryland's first responsible AI use policy, Everything is available on ai.maryland.gov, including a agency-by-agency list of how agencies are using AI. And I'm incredibly proud to share that within just 7 months of vetting and rolling out Google's Gemini AI tools to our workforce, 1 in 3 civil servants use vetted enterprise AI for a diverse range of productivity tasks. We have heavily invested in our digital service and human-centered design. This year, we acquired operatorship of the state's Cloud and Benefits Access Program, successfully rebranding it from MD Think to Maryland Benefits. By launching the mobile-first eligibility screener and one application, we achieved a 53% reduction in the time required to complete benefits applications, and we've processed over 320,000 applications since its launch in July. To continue delivering these critical outcomes, we have doubled the size of our Maryland Digital Service Team and launched the new Maryland.gov on a secure, scalable platform to increase access to service, benefits, and opportunities provided by the state. Of course, to keep serving the public, systems, services, and our data must remain secure. We have expanded our cybersecurity umbrella to local communities through the new Local Information Security Officer Program, delivering direct support to 42 jurisdictions, including municipalities and K-12 school districts. And we have launched one of the widest reaching state-level vulnerability disclosure programs, or VDPs, in the country. This new cybersecurity program gives security researchers and the general public a legal pathway to report cybersecurity vulnerabilities in web-facing state of Maryland IT systems and services. To date, roughly 250 vulnerabilities have been identified. On the physical infrastructure side, we are one of the only state agencies in the nation to own and operate our own statewide fiber network and public safety radio system. This year, our public safety network expanded to thousands of new users. Their system proved absolutely critical when first responders used it to save lives during dangerous flooding in Western Maryland. Furthermore, through the Digital Infrastructure Group executive order signed by Governor Moore, we are actively collaborating to eliminate silos and bridge the digital divide across our state. Underpinning all of this is our commitment to data management and optimization. We recently launched MD-IMAP 4.0, advancing our geospatial platform with upgraded statewide imagery that directly supports 911 call centers by improving caller location accuracy. In conclusion, I believe we are building a government that is safer, faster, and more responsive to the people of Maryland. I thank you for your time, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. And can you remind us how long you've been in the position now?
3 years.
Yeah, 3 years. Okay, it goes by fast.
It does.
I did want to mention one thing at the start of the hearing, which is that we received some very complimentary feedback on your agency and how helpful you were to MDOT and MTA when they had their cyber incident. And they gave us very positive feedback about how responsive and helpful your agency was. So thank you for that. And I'm sure there are many other things, but I did want to mention that because they made a point of mentioning it to me.
Thank you for sharing that.
And we will start with Delegate Spiegel.
Okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Secretary, good to see you. Thank you for being here. I wanted to start off by asking you about the various requirements for quarterly and annual reporting that were mentioned by the DLS analyst. I know in the 2025 Joint Chairman's report, there were a number of requirements for reporting. I believe we may have just in the last couple of days received the quarterly report on IT spending.
I believe so.
But I haven't had a chance to review it because it just came in. And frankly, my understanding is that means it's a couple months late. And I wanted to see if you just wanted to comment on, in terms of the ability to meet the reporting schedule.
Sure.
For that. There was also IT Productivity Suite report, but I think that's not due until 30 days before implementation, so maybe that trigger hasn't occurred yet. But also reports due on the statewide Agile Teams master contract. There was one due, I believe, on December 1st of last year. I don't know if we received that one. And then separate from the 2025 JCR, there is OSM Cyber Preparedness Report that was due, I believe, at the end of the year as well. I'm not sure that, at least as of late February, that we had received that one either. So if you could just talk about those and any others that might be pending.
Sure. So I believe all 3 reports were submitted. My understanding is that they were submitted to the wrong email address and there was some kind of internal confusion. We're happy to follow up with a timeline, but we should have all 3 reports and we can make sure that you have them available as well. I don't know if there's anything you want to add on the Agile Teams report, but.
No, I just believe there was a little bit of miscommunication, I think, with the Agile Teams report. That's a co-report between DoIT and DGS OSP, and I think there was just some miscommunication on who was submitting, but we have submitted that as well.
Okay. Since I mentioned the cyber preparedness report among them, let me ask you about the cyber assessment efforts. I understand there's about $17 million left in the balance of the funds that were allocated for that. Do you have plans for those $17 million? How do you intend to use those?
Yeah.
And then I have a follow-up question about the status of the technology procurement team and what's going on there.
Sure. So I'll start with the cyber assessment funds. So we're a bit behind schedule in terms of rolling out the next set of biannual assessments. We're required to assess all state agencies every 2 years. We ended up sort of working with DGS to pull back the RFP and then put it back out on the street. So the funds will be spent. The procurement is out on the street now, and we should be able to launch that shortly. So the funds will be obligated to that.
Okay. I also wanted to ask if you had any further updates on the MITDP Oversight Division. I know it's brand new and you're standing it up now, but just so we can have the most current understanding of the status of the oversight efforts and what you see as the timeline for getting it sort of up and fully running to be able to fulfill its mission.
No, it's a great question, and I will try and rein myself in because I could talk about this for a long time. But it's one of the achievements I think we're most proud of at DoIT. As I said, when I started, we had oversight authority, but not necessarily the in-house expertise to really course correct some of these projects. So we created the Oversight Division, which is a complement to the Maryland Digital Service Team, which is all the engineers, product managers, designers that we're bringing in-house to really support agencies on their software development projects. So with regard to oversight itself, the ITIF, or the IT Investment Fund, has about 55 projects in it. And they are all kind of going through this, reassessment of where they are. We've been working with all of their teams since I started and done some kind of high-level diagnostics on the status of these projects. So they're all going through an effort right now to sort of re-baseline where they are in terms of their progress. And then we will be assigning teams to those projects that we feel could use a little of extra attention. So the oversight work that we've always done in terms of collecting sort of security and financials and understanding their work with their if they have outside vendors, for example, all of that work continues. But the Oversight Division, will partner with the Maryland Digital Service Team to sort of directly intervene where those projects might need some additional support. One of the other key things that we're doing, to kind of put this in context, a lot of the MITDPs were given a massive award up front and sort of all the funding up front. And that's something that we're putting a stop to. What we want to see vendors deliver is sort of small incremental value to ensure that they can deliver something before we sort of lock ourselves into these big contracts. So that's something that will be sort of a new requirement going forward, or the way in which we'll kind of cap funding. We want to see what agencies and their vendors, if they're using an outside vendor, can do for a very small amount in the first couple of years. The other big requirement that is new that I wanted to mention that we rolled out this year, and it ties to the work we've been doing to bring more in-house IT expertise, is requiring state agencies to have a dedicated project manager, engineer, and designer on their projects to ensure not only that the project as it is initiated gets kicked off well, but that we start from day one thinking about the sort of operations and maintenance phase of projects. I think that's something that we've also observed is that, there's this major drop-off when a project is, software projects are never really done, but agencies, I think historically have not planned for the tail, like operating them in perpetuity. So that's a major requirement that we've put in place this year.
Okay. Since you brought up the ITIF, the ITIF, I wanted to ask you about the rolling fund balance on the ITIF, particularly since you're pointing out that the new strategy is not to award lump sum, huge amounts of money to agencies for projects up front. We have a significant rolling balance. I understand that is the point of a recurring fund, to be able to plan for the future when some years we're going to have larger investments than others. But can you comment on, whether you think that's the right amount? Is it too much to have over $200 million rolling over each year in that fund, particularly since you have this new approach?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. So the ITIF is actually sort of a culmination. So we do get a target from DBM, to your point. But the ITIF is actually comprised of what agencies request of us. So, if agencies, and actually this is something we can follow up with you offline on if you're interested in. The agencies this year, for example, submitted well in excess of the target we were given. And so we did actually recommend to DBM that, this money would not be successfully spent. And so we did reduce a lower amount. So it's not necessarily, it's a target, but it's not necessarily sort of a rolling pool in the way that a traditional capital fund might work. And we have worked this year with DBM to sort of recommend a much lower target than the requests coming in from agencies.
Okay. Thank you for that. I also wanted to ask you, I won't belabor this issue because I know there's a disagreement between your agency and DLS on the question of lower performance indicators. And so I understand that, and I understand the explanation that was provided by the agency. I just want to put out a call in the hope that going forward, that now that you've identified these factors that may have led to the lower performance indicators in the view of DO-IT, that going forward we will see results that will not reflect the same low level of performance.
Yeah, I will comment on it if I might. I think that one of the indicators is a fewer amount of projects that are using agile development, for example. I would argue that's a good thing because I'm a stricter grader than my predecessors have been. But to your point, I want to see 100% of projects using agile development. And to me, that goes back to agile development means building, taking an iterative approach, which tacks back to, we're going to give agencies a much smaller award, see what they can do, and kind of continue to scale from there. So to your point, I would expect as we kind of make that reform, the number of projects will hopefully get to, my goal is 100%.
Great. I want to ask you finally about a couple of specific projects that involve other agencies, but which you are obviously working on. The first is, I just want to understand what the statewide permitting platform actually does and what permits it covers, if you all know. And if that's a more appropriate question for the agencies that are working with you, let us know. But I want to understand what that program does.
Sure. I do think that the Department of Planning is probably the right agency. I will comment on, there's obviously a lot of interest in this space. And we did work with Secretary Flora and the department to create a sort of a prototype of what a online sort of permitting dashboard could look like. So there's a prototype that's available right now. I think Secretary and Flora and I are looking at what does the 2.0 look like, with the goal being how do we increase transparency for both for the government itself, but for outside contractors or vendors, in particular in the sort of place-based environment space. Sort of think about physical projects. How do we think about reflecting to them, where your permits are stuck? Are they stuck at MDE? Where are they, and how might we reduce that time? So I think Secretary Flora really owns the vision for that, but we've been working with her on some of the technology to support that.
Okay. And then the other agency that I wanted to ask about, since there are several projects listed, is SBE, the State Board of Elections. some of the large IT projects might have been in the works for quite a while, and it's sort of reasonable to assume that they would wait to deploy certain things until the next election cycle so that they would be saving costs prior to that. But I think we also want to be assured that we are organized and we are secure in terms of all of these projects: poll book modernization, new voting system, campaign reporting system, the VREAM, several projects in an election year being rolled out. And I just kind of want to give you the opportunity to tell us about the security level and the organizational level to make sure that these things will be up and running and smooth for our election this year.
No, it's a great question. Whole book in particular was one, I would say, early rollout of the Maryland Digital Service Team. We partnered with them when it was going out to RFP. So we've had a great partnership with SB. When the poll book project, it had stalled for years, and then they were going to put a new RFP out on the street. I think this was sometime late last year. So we worked with them to review the RFP. And make sure that it, to your point, would sort of meet modern standards in terms of accessibility, security, et cetera. So we're continuing to work with them on the poll book project as it rolls out, and then likewise, expect to work with them on the other two projects as well. From a security standpoint, we've also had a really great partnership there. It's a little tricky because they are a independent agency, and so we want to maintain that sort of neutrality. But we have talked about how we share information, in particular between our two security operations centers. So if we're seeing any sorts of activity, to your point around, elections are a major threat, and if we see any activity or any warnings that we get from CISA at the federal level, we want to make sure to share that information, and then vice versa. So we've established that last year, around some of the elections, we were looking at how we can better collaborate on that information, and that's a partnership that I think is really critical to maintain.
Great. Okay. Thank you for all those answers to those questions, and I look forward to receiving future JCR updates and quarterly and annual reports now that we have clarified how and where they go. Thank you.
Sure.
And I would just ask our legislative analysts to make sure that we have the reports that they have submitted, track them down and send them to us if you can. We are running out of time to make any changes in the budget, but we definitely want to see those reports. We appreciate you guys being here, and we have, it looks like we have one person signed up to testify, Melissa Lehman.
She is my deputy secretary, so Nikki is in her place today.
Good. Then we have no one signed up for testify, and you all are finished.
Okay. Thank you for the time.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We have one agency left in our agency budget hearings for the session, and that is Department of Natural Resources. We are very happy to have you here. Saying this now just so I will not forget that we do have 4 people signed up to testify once we get through the legislative report and the agency response. We can begin the legislative report now.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I will now present the Maryland Department of Natural Resources operating budget summary for fiscal 2027. So the summary on page 1 shows that the budget increase is $19.2 million, or 4.4%, to $455.8 million. Jumping right into the Managing for Results exhibits. Exhibit 1 shows the Maryland State Park visitors and capacity closures. So what happened during the pandemic, we saw a huge increase in the number of people going to the parks, lots of visitors, and we also saw an increase in the park capacity closures, which is obviously limiting in terms of the people being able to enjoy the parks. Since the pandemic, we've seen a decrease in the visitors using parks, still higher than the pre-pandemic levels. And we've seen it's kind of a bouncing around, but the number of the park capacity closures are definitely going down, especially between 2024 and 2025, which is a great sign. So Department of Natural Resources has piloted a day-use reservation system at some of the parks that have had some of the biggest problems in terms of capacity closures, and it looks like it's eliminated the capacity closures, which is an excellent sign. Department of Legislative Services recommends that the DNR comment on its plans for expanding that system, whether the new system is changing access in any way. Exhibit 2 on page 10 reflects information about the winter dredge crab population statistics. So lots of lines, basic idea is the crab population is still going down a little bit. And it's worrisome because while the females are going up, they seem to be okay, The male crabs are not. And so it looks like that we could be experiencing a male crab population concern. So obviously, what can be done about this? There's a report that's looking at this information, the Chesapeake Bay Stock Assessment. I'm just going to look at the kind of overall picture of the crab population and kind of hopefully give us some understanding of what needs to be done next in terms of management actions. So DNR should comment on the status of that stock assessment, any preliminary findings and included in the drafts of it, and the attendant potential blue crab management considerations. The third, Managing for Result exhibit is on page 12. This one concerns the striped bass or rockfish. So what we're seeing here, it's still a really low level of overall striped bass in terms of the population. The average biomass in terms of the weight of the females, though, is still higher than it has been in the past when we had a moratorium, which is a good sign. But obviously, we'd like to see the levels be a little bit higher than they are now. So leave it at that. And then in terms of the federal rescissions on page 13, there are two there. The first one was funding for oysters. This is the oyster production for tributary scale habitat restoration. So that was reduced from $800,000 to $449,000. The agency was able to backfill with general obligation bond funding from the oyster restoration program, and any leftover funding that's not used for that purpose will then go back for the plantings at the Herring Bay Sanctuary as part of the oyster restoration program. Another funding restriction or rescission was the AmeriCorps funding. So notified April 25th, 2025, there was a rescission of nearly $400 million in AmeriCorps funding. The Maryland Park Service's Forest and Park Reserve Fund was able to be used to provide for that Maryland Conservation Corps program under the AmeriCorps umbrella. So that was able to complete its graduation in terms of that cohort. And DNR has been reimbursed for the federal funds that were rescinded during that time period in terms of the Forest and Park Reserve Fund. Going forward, the Department of Service and Civic Innovation, which is the sort of pass-through entity for that funding, identified alternative funding for AmeriCorps in fiscal 2026. On the bottom of page 13 are the legislative additions. This is the Deep Creek Lake Mechanical Harvester Program. So it's going underwater and grabbing up the aquatic vegetation there. DLS recommends that DNR comment on the status of the draft report on the work that has been done through the Deep Creek Lake pilot program. On page 14, the proposed efficiency there's a reduction of $500,000 in general funds in the Natural Resources Police, which is being swapped with an exact same amount of special funds from the State BODAC funds. So just level funding there, changing the fund source. And the second deficiency component is an increase of $750,000 in special funds from the Summers Cove Marina Improvement Fund to fund the management of the marina. We'll talk a little bit more about that as an issue in this analysis. Moving now to the agency spending chart on Exhibit 4, page 15. Just like to highlight here that the two largest programs in DNR's portfolio, the Watershed and Climate Services Program, formerly Chesapeake and Coastal Service, and the primary funding is $73.7 million for grants, largely due to the Chesapeake and Atlantic Coastal Bays 2010 Trust Fund. Maryland Park Service is a close second, largely $39.2 million for regular positions, and also a bunch of funding, $13 million for contractual FTEs in parks, full-time equivalents. On page 17 is the budget, Exhibit 5. You see some increases there for personnel expenses. Seems to be largely due to the increases for the Natural Resources Police. You also see increases there, around $6.3 million for the whole watershed restoration partnership grant. So that's funding that's actually coming from the Chesapeake and Atlantic Coastal Bays 2010 Trust Fund, being spent from that into the whole watershed restoration fund. And then it's being spent out of that fund. So it double counts it, but it's important to reflect that to show all of the movements of the money in the budget. So therefore, it's shown here that way correctly. There's a $12.7 million decrease for the Chesapeake and Atlantic Coastal Bay 2010 Trust Fund. We talked a little bit more about that in the Chesapeake Bay overview analysis. There's $3.3 million and $1.9 million reductions for some of the information technology projects, larger projects due to the timing of the funding for those projects. There's a $3 million increase for the power plant assessment program technical contracts associated with a lot of the additional work that's being done, both the legal concerns and also just the increase in utility scale solar projects and transmission lines. And then on page 18, just the one highlight there, the Maryland Park Service funding increases by $3.2 million for a number of parks. We'll talk about it as an issue in this analysis. The BRVA provisions are on page 20. Maryland Park Service operating costs are supported. So this is The Heritage Conservation Fund is a component of program open space stateside funding. The idea is to make sure that everybody's clear that that funding is part of the POS state land acquisition balance. As a result of that, that means the balance is higher, which then allows for DNR to more easily meet the $880 million balance threshold for the program open space state land acquisition fund for the uses of operating funding to support the Maryland Park Service. The Power Plant Assessment Program, on the bottom of page 20, there's a Strategic Energy Investment Fund authorization expansion for this particular purpose. The idea here is that there are 3 sub-programs. We'll talk a little bit more about it as an issue in this analysis. And the idea with the full changes that the administration is proposing is to have all 3 sub-programs funded by the Strategic Energy Investment Fund in fiscal 2027 going forward. And then finally, there's the Waterway Improvement Fund distribution modification on the bottom or the top of page 21. This is a modification of $250,000 that was required to be provided to a statewide historic preservation nonprofit organizations. That was funding that was going to be changed for fiscal 2027, fiscal 2028 only in terms of the modification. Then there's, in terms of the personnel data on page 21, 12 regular position increase, 41 contractual full-time equivalent decrease. The 34 positions that were abolished, in terms of the 9 that were vacant and the 25 that were due to the voluntary separation program, as it occurred at the October 2025 Board of Public Works meeting. And then the fiscal 2027 allowance reflects there are 7 new positions, 5 in the power plant assessment program to handle all the additional work that they're doing now. And there are 2 in the natural resources police, and then there's 7 contractual conversions. So it's long-term employees that are being brought into regular positions, and there are also 2 abolished positions. DNR's budget turnover was reduced from 10.6% to 7.55%, which allows for more funding for personnel expenses in fiscal 2027. First issue on page 23 concerns the Maryland Park Service, additional funding needed for all the work, all the good work that's being done there. So I want to highlight that the Exhibit 6 shows fantastic opportunities here in terms of new expanded Maryland state parks. And that's showing that all the funding that's being provided to support the either opening, brand new opening, or the kind of opening to the public since we've had the park for a while in 2 cases, $3.2 million. But the question is, what is the sustainability of the overall parks funding situation? Because the transfer tax obviously fluctuates. Program open space state land acquisition funding is being used right now to help balance the operating budget for the Maryland Park Service, and that not necessarily a sustainable situation. So DLS does want to kind of have the agency talk about that, and also wants to talk a little bit about the Gwynns Falls State Park, which is not included in the parks that are being opened or expanded in fiscal 2027, yet there are operating costs of $2.8 million have been highlighted in a recent report, and then potentially capital costs of $7 million to a high of $18 million. So obviously large costs kind of on the horizon going forward with a sort of unstable revenue source. DLS recommends that DNR comment what the long-term plan is for funding the 6 new or expanding parks. The estimated operating capital costs for the Gwynns Falls Lincoln Park State Partnership Park, given the heavy reliance on the POS state land acquisition balance. And also, DLS recommends that DNR comment the status of setting up affiliated foundations and the potential revenue that could be realized from them. Then on page 25, the Power Plant Assessment Program is discussed. So it's tasked with completing an independent environmental and socioeconomic project assessment report for every application to the Public Service Commission for a certificate of public convenience and necessity. So associated with power plant construction. There are 3 sub-programs as described earlier, page 25. General direction and impact assessment do those evaluations of the certificates of public convenience and necessity. The environmental review sub-program actually reviews all sorts of other permit applications throughout the state, but is not eligible to receive, looks like it's not eligible to receive Strategic Energy Investment Fund money because it's not directly involved with power plant projects. So that's why the expansion of the Budget Reconciliation and Financing Act provision to incorporate all 3 programs there. On Exhibit 7 on page 27, you see the overall history of the power plant assessment program. You see that's a substantial increase in both personnel over time, increasing from 10 in 2011 to 23 in the fiscal 2027 allowance. And you also see that substantial increase both in the number of projects that are being undertaken and also the funding from the Strategic Energy Investment Fund. So that's this $5.7 million that are reflected in the budget for fiscal 2027 as a budget reconciliation and finding act provision for that overall piece. DNR's comment recommends that DNR comment on the long-term funding plan for the program, what roles the following should play in the program's funding structure, too. An allocation of certificate of public convenience and necessity application fees, perhaps after a fee increase, and an increase in the environmental surcharge per kilowatt hour of electricity distributed to retail electric customers supporting the Environmental Trust Fund. Then on page 29, the third issue concerns Summers Cove Marina management. So the management of the marina was transferred in Chapter 444 of 2025 to DNR. The fiscal 2026 budget amendment that was received reflected some disturbing fact that they had to write off a number of invoices for the commission's work that was done for Summers Cove. So not a good sign that they had to write off debt, $1.1 million, and then now DNR is going to then be managing that marina. So the question is, what does that look like going forward? Does DNR have a contract in place to have an external vendor do this, or is it DNR going to do it itself? DLS recommends that DNR comments on why the marina was operating at a loss and what the implications are for DNR's management, and also recommends that DNR comment on whether it's decided whether the marina will be managed internally or contracted out. On page 29, there's a brief mention there about the audit finding for the Mel Nolan Woodland Incentive Fund. So over time, the Mel Nolan Woodland Incentive Fund should have received $430,000 that it did not receive due to kind of miscommunications between several different agencies in terms of how that money was supposed to be received from local governments to the controller to DNR. DLS recommends that DNR comment on the status of recovering the $430,000 that should have been transferred to the Mel Nolan Woodland Incentive Fund as part of that audit finding response. And then finally, the Climate Pollution Reduction Grants funding clarity provided on page 29. So first, we'll go to page 31, though. Exhibit 8 shows the big picture, $133.1 million. You're not seeing $77 million or so for the Maryland Department of Transportation. It's not broken out in the same way. $42.5 million of that federal funding will be going to the Department of Natural Resources for leveraging carbon dioxide reductions through working on natural lands and working lands as part of that Atlantic Conservation Coalition. So a lot of work coming up in the next couple of years. DLS recommends that DNR comment on how it intends to use that $42.5 million over that 5-year period that is receiving. And then finally, we have the Memorandum of Understanding on Patuxent River Wildlands Trail Maintenance on page 32. So the Memorandum of Understanding was submitted as requested. The restriction of funding was released, or the funding was released, and that's all we have to say about that one. The final thing we need to talk about is operating budget recommendations on page 33. 4 pieces of narrative, all of which are generally kind of annual narrative. The summary of Chesapeake Bay restoration spending, the historical and protected Chesapeake Bay restoration spending reports, then the Chesapeake and Atlantic Coastal Bays 2010 Trust Fund, and finally the whole Watershed Act funding report. And that last one is sort of a new-ish version of reporting to get at the whole spending for Chesapeake Bay restoration. Unless there are any questions, that concludes the presentation.
Thank you for that. We appreciate your very thorough analysis, Mr. Gray. And now we will turn it over to Secretary Kurtz, and you also have with you
Lauren Buckmaster, the Director of Finance and Administrative Services. Sorry.
Both of you need to speak into the mics as much as possible. Thank you.
Lauren Buckmaster, Director of Finance and Administrative Services.
Much better, thank you. And Secretary?
Good afternoon, Madam Vice Chair, or Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee. Thank you so much for the time today. For the record, Josh Kurtz, Secretary of the Department of Natural Resources. And I want to thank Mr. Gray for a very detailed analysis. He actually touched on many of the comments, the overall comments I wanted to make. So I'm going to jump right into those responses because I think we'll be able to bear that out in here. Starting with question number 1 on page 7 and the plans for our parks day use reservation system. I think this has been an incredibly important and frankly incredibly successful pilot that we've put forward. We really leaned into different types of technology for our park service, That is enabling us to do three things. One, ensure we know how many people are going to be coming to the parks to end our capacity closures. Two, provide a safer environment. One of the, I'd say, kind of happy coincidences of this is that we actually figured out we had a better handle on who was in the parks, how many cars. So at the end of the day, if we didn't see as many people leave as came in, it was a lot easier for us to then check and figure out what was going on. And then the third is it helped us really do a lot more cost collection and ensure that we knew and we were able to collect all the money that was could be coming into the parks. So many of our parks have during the busy season, they have somebody who sits in the entrance and collects the fee to come into the parks at between $3 and $5 as an individual per park. Not every park has an entrance fee, but what we were able to do with this was actually expand that for the rest of the year. Normally what you do if you come to a park, we have what's called the honor system. The Park Service affectionately refers to it as the dishonor box because most people do not pay to enter our parks even though they're supposed to. And so what this enables us to do is actually do cost recovery for those times when folks are coming into the parks and not actually paying. So I think we're very excited about this. We are planning to expand this to 15 additional sites this coming year in order to, again, continue to add some of this technology that we have not had and really be able to get a better handle on from a safety perspective and a cost perspective what's going on in the parks. And as Mr. Gray touched on, having a long-term solution for our funding is critical, and we see cost recovery as a key part of that. Moving to question number 2 on page 11, as it pertains to the crab stock assessment, we have managed our blue crabs based off of our female numbers for many, many years. And what's going on right now is an assessment being done by many of the top scientists in our region, DIMS, the Virginia Institute of Marine Sciences, UMCS, University of Maryland Center for Environmental Studies, the department, our colleagues in Virginia, bringing together all the experts and watermen to have these conversations around what's going on with the blue crab population. And so we are going to be completing our peer review in April, but this assessment is going to add more benchmarks and more ways for us to look at the population, not just looking at the females. Because as we're seeing, female population has been increasing slightly because we've been managing for them, but males and juveniles has decreased and the overall population is getting to a concerning place. Also interesting to note, Virginia and Maryland have very different crab markets. In Virginia, they harvest primarily females, and in Maryland, we harvest primarily males. So a potential for a long-term economic issue here in Maryland if we're not able to access the male crabs. Moving to question number 3 on page 14, I wanted to comment on the Deep Creek Lake pilot program. Basically what we have here is a technology that's been used in the Great Lakes for many years to control underwater grasses. The underwater grasses are really important for water quality, habitat for our fish species, but have become a nuisance for people that have docks like to swim, et cetera. And so what we did is we set up 3 pilot locations at varying depths of the lake, and we brought in a machine that is in effect an underwater grass cutter. And it goes and it takes a certain percentage off of the underwater vegetation. We're evaluating the impacts in these 3 sites to our fish population, to water quality, and understanding if by reducing it to the levels, it'll provide a better swimming and boating experience. We are going to be presenting that to the Deep Creek Lake Policy Board this spring and then figuring out if we're going to be recommending to move this through regulation into more of a regular project and giving individuals the opportunity potentially to hire, maybe creating some small business opportunities at the lake to hire individuals to maintain the underwater grasses. Moving to question 4 on page 25, and I think frankly this is one of the most exciting things we're doing at the department right now is expanding access and expanding our park system. And we're taking a little bit of a different approach to the financing of these parks than we have in the past. We're evaluating each one of these parks based off of what we know we have from an asset perspective at those parks. And so just running through them quickly, Catoctin Furnace Cemetery, the real key there is that we have a fantastic relationship with the Catoctin Furnace Historical Society, and so we're really going to be doing a lot of co-management with them. This will be coming into the Cunningham Falls system, so we have existing staff there to help with that, but really this is about ensuring that this place is protected long-term and really leaning into a very strong partnership we have with that society. So that does not give us concerns about long-term operating. With Tipquin Creek State Park is a really fascinating one. The individual who donated or who sold us this property is redonating the funds from the sale into an endowment for us to operate the park with. So for us to be able to recycle that capital, it's going to be really important for us from an operating perspective moving forward. It's also the first park in Wicomico County, so really continuing to close the gap of park access and park equity across the state of Maryland. Fascinating story. This individual has invested millions of their own dollars in period accurate restoration of the farm and homestead, and it's also a fantastic natural scene as well. Freedman State Historical Park is part of a park that has very strong revenue from agricultural leasing in Montgomery County and existing staff, so that is not going to have additional pressure on our operating budget, but will provide a really unique story on enslaved communities in the state of Maryland. We're excited about that opening this year as well. Savage Highland State Park was formerly the Savage River Lodge. This is an incredibly high-end glamping facility, if you will. We do not have those across the park system, but what we do have is a 1-year wait time to rent any of our mini cabins. This is going to bring on 8 yurts and 16 cabins to the system. And one thing that is also really unique about this facility is that it is really high end when it comes to the outdoor recreational offerings in the winter. And normally in our Western parks, that's the time when we start to see revenues decline. They have existing snowshoe and cross-country ski courses, fantastic facility. And looking at this one, we believe this one will actually create revenue that we can then put into other parks within that unit. And then Wills Mountain State Park, we've owned property north of Cumberland since 1996. We've not opened to the public. And this park, I think, is incredibly exciting because this is going to be a premier rock climbing destination in the state of Maryland. It's one of the, I'm told, by one of the 3 best granite faces in the panhandle of Maryland, and one of the best in the mid-Atlantic as well. We were planning to open this a year ago, but we found nesting peregrine falcons, which are endangered species. And so we work with the climbing community to ensure that we could understand how we would need to set the routes up and then the timing of the use of that granite to ensure it doesn't impact the endangered species. But we have what we believe is going to be self-sufficient with the nominal entrance fees because of the demand for that climbing, and that's really going to be the focus of that park. And lastly is Holly Beach Farm Natural Resources Management Area, which is very close to here. This is going to be tied to Sandy Point. This is a park that is entirely in the critical area, does not have any concrete, and serves a very, very important resilience function for the city of Annapolis and the Naval Academy and the naval installations there. And so we're going to continue to manage this as very much as a natural area, but we will be providing opportunities for access, boat up, swim up, and eventually our plan is to do a ferry from Sandy Point for educational groups. It also has an incredible manor house that we think would be good for renting out. In terms of Gwynn Falls Leakin Park, there's a piece of legislation that we supported with amendments this year that does have capital dollars, $4 million in capital and $2.8 in operating startup starting in FY28. This would be the opportunity to really close that park equity issue, Baltimore City being the only jurisdiction without a park left in the state. And we're continuing to work with the sponsor on that. One thing about that bill that would hurt our long-term abilities to operate is that bill bars us from charging an entrance fee to that section of the park. So we're working on hopefully a solution with the sponsor there. And the last one, and I think most exciting for our long-term financial health, is the affiliated foundations. We've been working with the Office of the Attorney General and some other states that have these affiliated foundations. And what we found is the most important thing you can do in an affiliated foundation is set it up right, because what you don't want to do is lose control of the fundraising and ensuring that it's going to what you need in the operating space. And what we've learned through these conversations is that we really want to look to our university system foundations instead of maybe some of the state foundations, and really look to the national parks for their guidance on this, because what they get is significant operational augmentation, which is what we're looking for with this foundation. Turning to question number 5 on page 26, the long-term funding for the power plant research program. What we've really seen here is a significant increase in projects that we're looking at, and this funding will allow us to be able to meet the demand. We're also seeing legislation that changes the way that they are supposed to be going about and doing the assessments, and doing a lot more forward-looking. These are highly, highly complicated assessments. You need electrical engineering expertise that we don't have in-house, so we by and large contract that out. But as we start to see much larger and more substantial linear projects, so the transmission lines, that is a significantly larger amount of area they need to cover for environmental review. We're looking at endangered species, freshwater impacts, rare and threatened endangered species, conserved lands. So as we look to bigger projects, it does require a much heftier view from an environmental review perspective. It really does, this CEF funding really does allow us to ensure the EDTF fund continues on. I will say, I think as we continue to move forward, we've talked to PSC about this, but we don't get some of that funding that they collect to trickled back down to PPRP for their use. So we'll need to continue to look at funding sources for PPRP in the long term. On question number 6 on page 29, I wanted to address the Summers Cove Marina. The Summers Cove Marina has been operating at a loss for many, many years. This was purchased by the state in the 90s. In the early 2000s, a commission was set up to manage the facility. The department did not have a really good handle on the expenditures, the fee structures, and really did not have the opportunity to leverage greater kind of cost allocation and fund raising, frankly, potential. And so we passed this piece of legislation that moved that commission from a fiduciary body to an advisory body, and then we've taken that over. We do expect to operate at a loss because we were not paying the people before. We're going to operate this for 1 year. This bill also did give us the authority to change the fee structure. We were very, very low when it comes to other marinas in the region. We've been working very closely with our partners, especially at DNRAC, Delaware's Natural Resource Agency. They manage 3 similar size marinas to get a handle on kind of how much they're spending and what their fee structures are. And so at the end of this year, once we have a better understanding of the kind of money we can bring in, we'll look to decide whether we make this into something that we continue to manage or if this is something we lease out. I also think it's an important year for us to manage it because we're frankly spending more money on this marina than we ever have. There's a major capital project there that is going to make it safe and usable. We currently are in a point of rather critical failure for the bulkhead. So the way this marina is operating this year, we're going to be closing half of it, shifting slips to ensure we can do that capital project without any interruption, while still ensuring that the shuttle that runs to Smith Island that takes the kids to school is still able to run, that the Coast Guard facility there is still operational, and same with the Natural Resources Police. Moving to question number 7 on page 29 as it pertains to the audit finding for Mel Noland. This is one of the most complicated transfers of money I've seen at the department. A couple of good things have happened. SDAT has reclassified the difference between woodland and agriculture land, which has really helped us make sure that they're charging this fee or this tax on the right parcels. Based on whether the county where that transaction occurs is enrolled in the MALF Foundation, not whether there's MALF projects, whether they're enrolled in the foundation, that changes the percentage of funds from that tax that they get to keep and that are transferred to the comptroller. And what we were finding is SDAT was reporting just how much they were bringing in at the county level, and then the comptroller was reporting how much they were transferring to the department. And what we lost was that understanding of kind of the percentages that were going back to the county. And so we've worked with the 2 agencies to ensure that our process is tighter going forward, and we're able to understand the difference between those percentages. Although and in talking to the comptroller, they're confident that all of the funds the department has received is the funds that we will, looking back on previous transfers, and that we have received the appropriate amount. Moving to question number 8 on page 30, the climate pollution reduction funding. I think this is a really exciting opportunity for us. This is going to be the largest investment in resilience the department has ever made, and I wanted to share with you the metrics we're using for success. So this is 500 acres of afforestation, new forest planted, 1,000 acres of improved forest management, 600 acres of wetlands restoration, 400 acres of marshes protected by living shorelines, and 100 coastal resilience management plans developed for private landowners. All of these goals also are goals for the Chesapeake Bay Agreement, and so this is really going to jumpstart the continuation of the restoration of the bay, and it allows us to really work with partners to align to those goals. So we're excited about that, and we're confident that it will be completed by August 2029 on schedule. I also wanted to touch on just the recommended actions on page 33 and 34 to wrap up. We concur with providing the reports. We would appreciate the opportunity to discuss consolidating them because the historical and the current funding for the Bay, I think it's important to see both of those things together in narrative form. And then the whole Watershed Act funding also, again, as Mr. Gray touched on, very much embedded in that Chesapeake Bay funding. So we would like to be able to incorporate those into the same report. With that, I'm happy to take any other questions.
Thank you very much for that response, and it's very helpful when you go question by question and provide the answers. And who would like to begin? Delegate Harrison.
Thank you. I had a couple of areas that I flagged and just probably need just a little bit more clarity. With the registration or the reservation for the parks, was this was it advertised? Do most people know that they need to have a reservation to come into the park now?
Yes, yeah, and it's just for those 5 parks currently, and we did online social media, online announcements, and then we also posted it physically at the parks leading up to that. We also have surveyed at those parks to see what people think, and what we've heard by and large is really an appreciation for that. Before, what was happening was people were coming to the parks, not being able to get in, and frankly was ruining their day, right? They're having to figure out where to go next. People really appreciated knowing that they weren't going to get in ahead of time and being able to make other plans.
So what if an individual or family goes to the park and they did not have a reservation? What happens?
If it's not full, they're able to pay the entrance fee and get in. Okay. But if it is full, then they're unfortunately turned away.
Okay. Regarding the crab population, and I think I want to actually put the oysters in with this. We've had the sewage pipe burst. How do you see that affecting the watermen and the overall population of crabs and oysters?
Yeah, so I'll take them kind of separately, but overall, when we look at the Potomac interceptor, the thing that we're really relying on, frankly, from the health and safety perspective, which is important for the watermen, is the National Shellfish Sanitation Program. And so we're enrolled in that. We work with MDH and MDE, and what we're able to do is now analyze kind of water quality metrics so we can ensure that the shellfish within those segments of the water is safe. And we have seen those areas of the Potomac return to that. When we look at overall abundance, for crabs, as we talked about, it has been decreasing, but because the nature of the population of crabs, they're a migratory species and they're overwintering buried in the mud, we do not anticipate any impacts due to the spill for them, because frankly they're buried in the mud in the main stem of the bay and much further south, and they'll begin migrating up. We'll continue obviously to monitor that in case that becomes even greater concern. For oysters, we're continuing to work with MDE, MDH, EPA to evaluate through that National Shellfish Sanitation Program that the water quality standards are being met to be able to continue to sell those. I will say the oyster market this year was significantly declined. You might have seen in the press that we've asked for a disaster declaration. That has nothing to do with abundance. Oysters were about triple the population of what they were in the 2000s. That is strictly based on the fact that the market has collapsed. We think in part because of misperceptions around the Potomac spill, the significant amount of ice, and because of that, we actually took emergency action to extend the season by 2 weeks for the oysters. We're also seeing right now a rebound. There was moratoriums in Florida and Alabama, and if I'm giving you too much information, I'm happy to stop. But there were moratoriums in Florida and Florida, Alabama, and the Gulf. Those are now back to production levels, and so we do think there's greater, unfortunately, a lot more competition within the market. So while our supply has gone up, our demand has decreased, and that has resulted in much lower bushel prices for the watermen.
Okay, and so the watermen then are actually suffering a little bit.
Yes.
So, thank you. When we talk about the workload increase with the solar energy projects, I'm on page 26, by the way. I have a note down here. So there was a recommendation, or there was a recommendation to discuss how to continue on because we can't use C funds forever, basically. And there, we have to talk about the retail electric customers and how do we continue to ensure that we can continue to provide what is needed without having to increase the rates for the customers, basically. And what do you see? I know that there's a short-term suggestion to use C funds to help out with that, but we can't sustain that. And so the long-term, what do you think we might be able to do.
Yeah, I think there's two things I want to address there. The first is, and to your point, I think the reason we really leaned into the CEF this year is because the Environmental Trust Fund is, I think it's 0.003 cents on the dollar for the electrical users that goes into Power Plant Research Program, and recognizing how extremely high electricity is, we didn't really look to increase that fee to fund this. I think looking at CEF, the reason we felt comfortable with it is just because of how much of this was an explosion in renewable energy, and this will, by having more folks in this program, we'll be able to get more projects on the ground. I think long-term, looking out maybe the 3 to 5 years is where we need to work with you all to identify if it's still working through that or if it's looking at other fund mechanisms. Is it a general fund appropriation in the future for the future of the ETF or for the Power Plant Research Program, recognizing the incredible pressure on the ratepayer currently through the cost of our electricity.
Mm-hmm. And one of the things that I mentioned to my colleagues earlier was that the last few years I've been on ECM, I was on to ECM, and there was a suggestion or an implementation for increase in fees for the retail electric users. And when the people came down to testify, most of them were fixed income seniors, and individuals who, who look like me, who are suffering already. And so I would have a hard time seeing an increase in fees again for those individuals, because everyone is hurting, and we've got to find a way to have some relief without it being on the backs of our users. I think my last question is related to the climate pollution reduction grants. And there's it's on page 30, the lack of funding makes it difficult to track whether DNR and MDA are intended to receive federal funding. Again, we're back to the issue of whether or not the federal government is going to provide the funds that we have been relying on. And I have on in Exhibit 8, year 1 and year 2, my question was whether or not these funds have already been received for those 2 years.
Yes, they have. And so this fund is a multi-state collaborative where the application went through. So I believe it's I'll get back to you if this is incorrect, but I believe it's North Carolina has already received the funds and they're now distributing it out. And so we feel very comfortable moving this forward because the project was forward funded.
All the way out to year 5?
Yes.
Okay. All right, thank you. Mm-hmm. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Really great questions, Delegate Harrison, thank you. Delegate Spiegel. Oops, let's go to Delegate Metzger, didn't see his light.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Mine's real fast and quick. Question I have is for our parks, particularly around the ones with the water. How are we handling the midges?
Yeah, that's a great question. I know such a huge issue in your jurisdiction. So we've been working with MDA, who manages the spraying program. One thing we've been doing at DNR, we were asked a really interesting question in committee ENT the other day, was whether we're having an impact in our commercial harvest in terms of them being able to eat the midge larvae. We did an assessment of catch, and we don't think that that's an issue. So I think that's really, really beneficial. We're continuing to do science around that too. So our resource assessment service is looking at the prevalence there, and we've been reporting that information to MDA. We also had another, I think, potential opportunity. We're still studying whether it's going to work, but there's been some buildup of kind of like muddy material and debris. And so there's some thoughts around if we can change those to living shorelines, that we would then have the ability for kind of the grasses and things to recycle those nutrients to tamp down the midge population in those areas. So we're looking at available science to see if that's going to be a long-term viable solution.
That'd be great. And if you don't mind, if you could follow up with me personally, maybe give me some material that I can share with our constituents, because, there's marinas that can't even $300,000 boats, and they can't even get on the water, can't even go on their boat.
Yeah, and actually, I'm working on some stuff for Mr. Weaver, so I can send that to you as well.
Thank you. I appreciate that. You hit it.
Thank you for that. And Delegate Spiegel.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Secretary, I think you sort of addressed this in passing, but I kind of wanted to hone in on this question about long-term funding plans for state parks. I think what you're doing in terms of acquiring and opening these lovely, new locations to add to our portfolio is great. I think the day reservations, when you sort of zoom in on those individual parks that are doing the day reservations, great. But I think when you zoom out, the bigger picture is we now have a growing portfolio of assets here. We have to deal with ongoing capital expenses, ongoing operating expenses. The initial sort of capital acquisition and build out of these new parks relies a lot on program open space funding, which is understandable. That's what the funding is there for. But what is your vision for the long-term funding, both on the capital maintenance and on the operating side, as we continue to expand? We have a wonderful park system. We want to make it successful. We want to have it grow and be available to the public. But what's the plan for how we're going to continue to fund that? We have this foundations plan as well, but maybe you could speak a little bit to sort of the long-term big picture.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we've suffered from a death of 1,000 cuts, and so what we're looking for is the inverse of that, which is 1,000 solutions. And so what I mean by that is we did the cost recovery pilot down in North Point, up in North Point from where we are. And what we found was by having that entrance basically being part of, it basically went from someone being there to something you pay with a credit card, a gate that you get access all year round. We had almost 400% increase in our revenues that year. And I think that really shows that by only collecting revenue from basically April to the beginning of October, we're missing out on a significant amount of revenue that should be coming to the state to manage these parks. Another thing that we've been doing is working really closely with local vendors. And so before, what we would do is, we'd have a park manager who would go to the Costco and they'd buy like a whole bunch of frozen fish, and then people would come and we would sell that at our concession stands. We did not make much revenue there. And so what we've been looking at, and we've piloted this at Rocky Gap, is bringing in local concessionaires that get people excited to come out. Sandy Point, another example, we built an area where we have a big turnaround area now for food trucks. And so we're looking at smaller term but consistent leasing that allows us to, again, just maximize revenue production every day. So I think that's another piece. I think the thing the foundation allows us to do, though, is brand our parks in a way that we never have. And so if you look at some of the ways that the Parks Foundation, National Parks Foundation, has made a lot of their money, people want to buy T-shirts, right, that say Yosemite, Yellowstone. People want to buy T-shirts that say Rocky Gap, Assateague, Sandy Point. We don't really do that at scale. And so I think there are some significant branding opportunities as well that we're frankly just missing out on. And the last being the ability for more guiding that's happening in our parks that is not done by Park Service employees. And I think Wills Mountain, the new park's a great example of that. Giving rock climbing guides the opportunity to be able to actually pay us a very small lease or a fee like that, to be able to do that as well. And then on the capital improvements piece, we've never had a good handle on it, so we haven't been able to plan long term. And so if you look at, and I can send you the exact page, but if you look on actually it might not be included in here, but if you look at the number of capital projects that we have on that stack, it jumps significantly. The reason for that is now we have a system for capital improvement applications basically that comes up through a centralized area of the agency. We can then prioritize that and start knocking out a lot of these capital projects before they become extremely expensive. Fixing a roof before the house falls down, much smarter use of funds. And so we can now centrally process that. Whereas before, that was up to the manager of the parks to make that decision. So maybe a park was investing in something that had 5 more years of lifespan, and we could have been putting that money somewhere else. So I think it's also making sure that when we spend money, it's being spent frankly, a little bit more wisely.
Thank you.
Do we have any other questions? All right, we are ready for our public hearing portion, and we thank you both for being here.
Thank you.
We have Matt Stegman, Tim Casey, Bill Crouch, and Jim Brown. You can all come up, and whoever is ready may begin first.
Jim's son had a dental.
Okay, no problem. I'm sorry for his.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the subcommittee. My name is Bill Crouch, and I'm the Maryland State Director for the Conservation Fund, a national 501c3 nonprofit land trust. Today, I represent Forever Maryland in offering our strong support for the full and sustained funding for Maryland's real estate transfer tax programs in this year's budget. Forever Maryland is a statewide coalition representing nearly 30 land trusts and conservation organizations. The lands protected with program open space dollars are not idle green spaces. According to the Outdoor Industry Association in 2019, The outdoor recreation industry in Maryland contributed $14 billion in spending, generated 109,000 direct jobs, and generated $951 million in state and local tax revenues. Program Open Space also in part allowed Maryland to meet its 30 by 30 commitments and will no doubt be critical to the state's ability to meet its 40 by 40 commitments. We all want our kids and grandkids to have great experiences when they go outdoors and explore nature. We all want clean water and healthy communities. We support the good work being done by farmers to clean the bay and provide fresh local food. We support efforts to create a more equitable availability of green space, most particularly in overburdened and underserved communities. Only with consistent funding can this occur. Forever Maryland supports replacement of the transfer tax with GO bonds while seeking to get back to cash funding as soon as possible. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, Chair Watson, committee members. I'm Tim Casey with the Friends of Maryland State Parks. We're an all-volunteer 501c3. We're dedicated to preserve, protect, enhance, and advocate for our state parks. We support the FY 2027 Governor's operating budget funding for DNR and the Park Service. Please do not cut this funding. Two quick comments, both relate to the Great Maryland Outdoors Act, which became law in June 2022. First is in Park Service staffing. The Friends fully support and encourage all DNR's efforts to hire the 100 authorized Park Service positions as prescribed by the Great Maryland Outdoors Act. 5 have been hired in engineering and construction, and they have proved to be very valuable people in moving the critical maintenance projects. The second area is 95 positions were for rangers and maintenance staff across our 75 parks. The good news is that the PINs authorized in the FY 2027 budget track with the GMO Act, but hiring has been problematic. With 247 on staff in the Maryland Park Service in February 2023 and 254 in February 2026. It's an increase of 7 over 3 years. We hope to see the hiring accelerated and believe every effort is being made to do so. The second point is related to good news relative to the hiring of a volunteer coordinator, also specified in the Great Maryland Outdoors Act. The Friends are working collaboratively with the new statewide volunteer coordinator. There are thousands and thousands of state park volunteers across the state, and they can now be attempted to be aligned strategically across all 75 parks. And this is great news. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony and for all of the good work that the Friends do. I just wanted to ask you one quick question about your belief of what the problem is with the hiring.
Well, I wouldn't venture to say exactly what the problem is, but there's always attrition in any organization. And we do know, and I've talked to the secretary about this, but we do know that there are problems related to all the other federal as well as local jurisdictions, counties, in terms of their hiring practices and what they're willing to pay their people. So therefore, even entry-level positions into the Maryland Park Service, there'll be heavy competition for that. So this is a really recruitment strategy that needs to be, is being rethought, and I think a good job is being done there. But we'll have to give it another year to see how progress can be made on that. Thank you.
Understood. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair and members of the subcommittee. Matt Stegman from the Chesapeake Bay Foundation. Just want to start by saying, actually, Jim and I, our sons are on the same youth baseball team in Baltimore, so I told him that on his behalf, I would please direct the committee's attention to his written testimony that has some information about some really innovative work that they're doing supported by DNR grants related to marsh migration. So please take a look at that as you have an opportunity. But DNR is a really important agency. It does a lot of really heavy lifting as regards the restoration of the Chesapeake Bay. The secretary spoke extensively about some of the work that they do managing various fisheries. So, not just crabs and oysters, but also, striped bass, other economically and ecologically important species. So just we, support their budget as submitted and, support the agency and all the great work they're doing. Thanks.
Thank you. We appreciate you being here at several hearings this year. And I just have to ask, what age group is the baseball team?
They are 9 and 10-year-olds.
Girls?
Boys.
Boys. I thought you said girls. Good. So we wish his son the best with his tooth problem, and we will definitely check out the testimony. We appreciate all of you being here today, and I believe that is the end of our witness list. And so this hearing is adjourned. Members, you will please stay for a voting session. Thank you.
too much committee work. Okay. Let me see what.
Right. Hello, friends and members of the Women's Caucus. Delegate Michelle Guyton standing in as Vice President for Delegate Dana Jones, who is our President, who is still in subcommittee. We absolutely recognize that everybody is so busy today and everyone's in and out of subs. If you are on the Executive Committee, feel free to take a seat around this horseshoe. Join us.
Yes.
And we are going to get started because we don't have that much time today. But as we're moving through the program, please go ahead and have food. There is a lot of it considering how many people are here right now. So I have 2. I have 3.
The microphone. What about?
It's on. She'll be here soon. Oh. But yeah. No. So we're going to start today with our first presenter, Marcella Franskowski. So Marcella, if you want to come on up to the table or wherever you'd like to be. Sure. And Ariana, do we have our PowerPoint available to show? Oh, okay. Well, I'll go ahead and introduce her because I know that in the interest of time, we don't have a whole lot today. So whenever you're ready, Marcella. That is perfect. That's perfect. All right, so I'll introduce her as soon as we're ready. Okay. We're working on it, Marcella. We're working on it. So Marcella, wave your hand, is a nationally recognized leader in early intervention and special education. She's known for her innovative contributions in Maryland and nationally. She's really quite a big deal. She began her career with Baltimore County Public School System. She was a teacher, school-based administrator, central office leadership, and she served as the Assistant State Superintendent at the Maryland State Department of Education, where she led the efforts to make Maryland the first state to offer early intervention services through age 4. All right, that is a huge deal. That means special education services for our babies, right, which they were not getting before. This is an approach that significantly improved outcomes for children and for families. Marcella's strategic leadership advanced efforts in equity, access, inclusive education, and she is widely recognized and respected for translating research into effective policy and practice. So with more than 4 decades of experience, Marcella joined the Kennedy Krieger Institute to develop a comprehensive continuum of early care and education within their early childhood development and education system. And I think if Delegate Ruth is still here, I think that is in her area, in the Security Woodlawn area. It's called PACT, so if you get a chance to visit, please do. She currently serves as the Assistant Vice President of Early Childhood Education Strategy for the Institute at Kennedy Krieger. She is also one of my dearest friends and mentors from my years before being here, and I'm so grateful that she decided to come and speak to us today. So please welcome Marcella Franskowski.
And I just have to say that the feeling is mutual. I share the pleasure to work with Michelle as she was on our MSD state board. So quite an advocate for children and families, and just a pleasure to partner with. So thank you, Michelle. I can't think of a better place to be today in looking at women who truly change lives, right? It's policy, it's procedures and practices that change lives. And we were at a critical time to change the lives for our children and families, and especially our youngest learners. So I want to thank you. I'm a strong believer, as Michelle has said, to move policy into practice. And you are those policy makers, and you really can shift the whole trajectory for our children and families. So I want to thank you. So I sit next to you with pride today. So thank you, and humbly. So do I have a PowerPoint? Okay. Okay, I'm going to do my very best. The visuals simplify the story. Early childhood, I thought I'd start today with some background so that we're all in the same playing field to know what early childhood looks like in Maryland. At the national level, they describe early childhood as going from birth to 8 years of age or second grade. in Maryland, and today I'm going to focus on birth to kindergarten age. So what does it look like in Maryland from birth, that baby born, all the way to entry into kindergarten? So first, I think that we know the power. Do you want me to keep on going? Okay. First, we know that the whole purpose of early childhood and the reason why we have early childhood intervention and services is for kindergarten readiness. And we know that that begins, we've always said that readiness begins at birth, but I just want you to know readiness begins at prenatal time as soon as conception occurs. So truly looking at this period and this time, our lens, our focus is all on how do we get that whole child, physical, social, emotional, and skills in school, how do we get them ready for kindergarten? So you're going to see perhaps that there are, we divide our children by ages. We have a birth to 3, which is our very youngest age, and that's our our youngest learners. And we have for them the center childcare. So you can have our babies and you can go to childcare through a center, but we also have childcare for family homes. And that is probably our greatest outreach when we have families that have regulated childcare that's approved through the state. Then we have unregulated family childcare, and they do not go through the regulatory requirements of the state. And then we have family and friends. So we have child care where children are being watched by a grandmother or an aunt or an uncle or a neighbor. So child care can be through a center, it can be through all different kinds of family experiences, and then we also have early Head Start and Head Start. Then when we move up the chain for age, we talk about our 3 and our 4-year-olds. Where are our 3 and 4-year-olds in early childhood? As you all know, we have the new blueprint that tells us that the 3